Welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio, where truth equals reality, and truth is often stranger than fiction.
Hello everyone, welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio. This is your host, Royce the Redneck Radio Man, and joining me today is Attorney. Well, I'm assuming he's still Attorney. He might be retired now. And at any rate, Gordon Gianninoto. And he's going to tell us quite a bit today about experiences he's had with E.T. and them landing in his yard. And if I understood him correctly, coming into his house, and I might have misunderstood that part. And we're going to also, if we have enough time, it permits, talk a little bit about Planet X and what's the latest happening on the post ship. So, Gordon, how you doing today?
Very good, and I have my wife here, Janet Stanley, and she's had as many or more experiences than I have, and in a different way, too.
Hello.
Hello, Janet. I'm pleased to meet you. Actually, I kind of met you already once before. And if Gordon, Janet, if y'all can hold on just a minute. Somebody in the chat room said they refreshed but can't hear anything, and let me type to them real quick. Well, she just left the chat room again. Well, now she's back. Maybe she didn't think to click the player arrow. Okay. Now, this is a problem that a lot of shows have had in the very beginning, and what Blog Talk Radio did to resolve the issue was they had the page automatically load with the player already going at showtime. The only real problem with that is that a lot of people who are, okay, she can hear me now, a lot of people that are on a lower connection, like a 56K, it can freeze up their machine, especially if they don't have a lot of memory, so I try not to do that. So anybody coming to this show in the future, try to remember that when the show starts, you may need to refresh the page and then click the arrow on the player, because I try not to have that thing automatically load and freeze up computers. And pardon me, folks, got a little frog in my throat suddenly there. Now, again, I was just introducing Gordon and Janet, and now we got people that can hear me. Maybe Ray, you can be nice, and if somebody else has a little trouble, you could type in there the instructions for them so that I don't have to distract from the show. We're going to talk about their ET experiences, and we have time. We're going to talk about Planet X. I'll go to that again. But before we get started, I want to let you know that one of Gordon's favorite sites is postshift.ning.com, and he said you can go there and get all the information, and you can ask questions of Nancy Leader, I think it is, and get answers to your questions. They go through them and make sure that they haven't been asked first, is my understanding, and, don't already have a prior answer. Pardon me. For anybody not listening to the show right here at the site, you can call in at 832-632-7904. So, Gordon, real quick, like to start the show off, why don't you tell everybody exactly, when and how you started having visitations from E.T.?
The earliest one I ever remember was in Reading, Connecticut, where I grew up. And my mother put me to bed for a nap. I was about 5 years old. It was a nice summer afternoon. And as soon as I got in bed, some adults came and got me and took me somewhere. And when they took me, I was an adult. And that was shocking. I didn't know that was possible or how that could happen. And I have no idea whether I was out of body or I was completely removed or how exactly that worked. But I do remember many, many lifetimes like other people remember last week. So, and I have gone out of body, and I've even projected a second self to another location while I was awake at the first location. So I've done a lot of things that, you've heard of out-of-body experiences. So I've done a lot of things like that, but it was really a surprise to be an adult. And I was taken to another planet, I know that, and I don't really know how I got there. And there was a gigantic meeting, and I mean hundreds and hundreds, maybe even thousands of people, and it was about something big or something that was about to happen on a planet. And for all I know, it was a meeting on another planet about Earth. I just don't remember any of that. And I remember that I was there for 3 days, and then I was brought back probably an hour after I left. And I jumped out of bed and I ran in to see my mother, and she'd been taking an afternoon nap too. And I woke her up and I said, "You're not going to believe what happened. Some people came and took me to another planet for 3 days, and I just came back." And she was, of course, because I was 5, she's like, and she never heard of anything like that. She said, "Well, that's not possible. You were dreaming." And I was like, "No, that is what happened." And she's like, "Well, that couldn't be. You're dreaming." And I said, "No." And and so that was, but see, that wasn't necessarily an experience at the time that I could connect to extraterrestrials or spaceships. But then as a child, my parents got divorced and we moved to a different house, and it was deep in the woods. It was 7 miles to the nearest traffic light or stoplight or street light. And we'd be asleep. My brother, my mother, and I would be asleep in the house. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the night, it was as if spotlights were all over the outside of the house, and that it was so bright. It was brighter than daylight, and we'd all be awake, which was kind of funny too. How come at that exact moment that these floodlights went on, we were wide awake? So we would all run downstairs to the front door and open it up and step out on the porch, which is this little cement or stone porch, I forget. And everything would be dark again. And so we would never see where the light went or anything. And this happened over and over and over. I can't tell you how many times it happened. It is at least dozens of times, maybe hundreds of times. And but I was always interested because my father was interested in extraterrestrials, and he had books on it. So one of the first books I ever read was about Roswell, and then about telepathy and dimensions and masters and meeting masters and ancient wisdom. And so all of that interested me tremendously. So the very first time I ever started earning money was as a photographer at age 11. And the very first money I earned, I bought a telescope, and I would spend all night outside looking at the stars and the planets. And then when I was 15, I saw a mile-diameter mothership materialize. It sort of winked in as if somebody had a dimmer switch, and it was over San Juan Harbor in Puerto Rico, and my mother had taken us on a tour of the Bacardi rum factory, and because my mother always does things late, we were the last tour, and we were pretty much the only ones on the tour. So when we got on the ferry to go back to San Juan, because it's on an island in the harbor, when we got on the ferry, the only other people on the ferry were all the workers from Bacardi, and they were all downstairs in the ferry. But, you know, Puerto Rico was new to us, and we went up, there was a stairs to get up on the upper deck. So we're sitting there, and we're going back towards away from the Bacardi factory. The lights are fading, and the city lights of San Juan are getting brighter. And overhead, it's a moonless night, and all of a sudden there was this gray, without any clouds, and there was this gray dot that just kept getting bigger and bigger, and it seemed like the sun was going to rise right behind this dot. And as the dot expanded, it became this huge white W, just like a skywriting plane had done a script W in the sky, and out of the center loop, there was this huge orange glow. Now, this is around 8 o'clock or 8:30 at night in April 1964, and the light was an orange light just streaming through the clouds. I mean, it was the most beautiful sunrise or sunset you've ever seen, except that it was in the middle of the sky at night. And all of a sudden, very slowly out from the center loop moved this huge object, and I mean huge. It was a mile in diameter, it was flat on the bottom, and it was hemispherical on the top. It was like as if you had the top half of a grapefruit. And it was like as if it was made of white milk glass, and it had an orange glow inside of it. And because of the orange glow, you couldn't see any details. And it moved slowly off to the side. So this W-shaped cloud is over to the left, and this huge mothership is off to the right. And it's just sitting there. And this is about 10 minutes into it. And it was probably a half an hour ferry ride. And then all of a sudden a door on the side of the mothership opened up that you couldn't see until it opened. So it opened up, and you couldn't see in there, but you could see it was a door and that it opened. And as it was open, a saucer came zooming out right from inside the mothership out over the Atlantic Ocean going east and kept on going. And then about 2 minutes later, a second saucer, the exact same color and size and shape, which I would estimate is like 30 feet in diameter, a regular flying saucer, orange, glowing orange, and it zoomed out. And then a third one, and when the third one disappeared off over the Atlantic, then the door on the side of the ship closed, and it very slowly moved back towards where this center of this cloud had been, but was now sort of like a misty area off to the left. And as it went into this misty area, it just sort of winked out. And the size of the ship, the mothership, compared to the saucers, was like, to put it in easy to understand terms, it was like mosquitoes next to a bear. I mean, this thing was huge. And I have excellent eyesight. I used to build model airplanes, gasoline-powered, and free flight. And then I designed and built three-stage rockets. And I used to play golf. I played baseball. I mean, I know what I'm looking at, and I knew aircraft, and I knew distances, and this thing was a mile in diameter. So it moves back into the misty area, and it was just like somebody had a dimmer switch on it, and it just got dimmer and dimmer, and you could see it through this misty area that used to be a W. And the mist was sort of like a gray mist, and there it was. It winked out. So I go, oh my God. And my mother and brother said, well, that's interesting, but what's for dinner? And I was like, you gotta be kidding. What do you mean, what's for dinner? Do you realize what we just saw? And they're like, well, we're hungry, and, so there wasn't any more discussion. And we were staying at this hotel in San Juan called the Caribe Hilton. And the next morning we asked the newspaper guy if there were any articles in the newspapers about it. And he said he had been in the Army and moved to Puerto Rico. When he was stationed there, he saw saucers over El Yunque, the rainforest, and they were always these orange glowing saucers. He never saw a mothership, and there were no articles in the paper. And we asked other people, and nobody had seen it. We just couldn't find anybody else that had seen that. But for me, that just about changed my life. So when I went to college, I studied aerospace engineering, and around that time, I had been reading all these books that my father had about telepathy, and I'm the kind of person, I want to do something myself. So I know you have a lot of UFO researchers on who, when they hear about somebody had contact with aliens, then they want to go find other people that had contact with aliens. But when I read about somebody who had contact with aliens, I'm thinking, well, if they did it, I'm going to do it. So around 1968, I started going outside at night, and I gradually came to realize that it's got to be the same up there, off Earth, as it is down here. And by that I mean there's all kinds of people. There's the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I certainly didn't want to contact the bad or the ugly, so I would ask. Exactly. So I would ask, are there any unselfish extraterrestrials that are kind and nice that I could meet? And so I started doing that, and I did that for 20 years, and nonstop. And at night, whenever I was by myself, and sometimes I'd tell other people what I was doing, but mostly people weren't interested, to be honest with you. And so the 60s and the 70s went by. In 73, I remember that the Russians had this space satellite called Skylab orbiting the Earth, or the Americans. We had a space station called Skylab. And I got out my telescope one night because, being that we were in Connecticut, we used to get the New York Times, and in the bottom of the front page they would list when notable satellites would pass overhead, and they'd be visible at night. So, and that was like a normal thing on the bottom of the New York Times. So it had the times that Skylab would be visible from New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. So I got my telescope and I was looking at Skylab, and I had it set up so that there's two axes on a telescope control, little knobs that you turn, And if you set your telescope up correctly with the plane of the ecliptic, you can follow something by just turning one knob instead of turning two knobs. And that's how I had it set up. And of course, when you look at this, even the space station or Skylab, I mean, they're just dots in the sky. They aren't like the space station. We've seen that a few times, and it's much bigger and brighter. And sometimes it looks like the letter T. But Skylab was just a dot, you know. So I had it set up so that I was following Skylab, and it was going from northwest to southwest from where I was in Connecticut. And it sort of went towards the New York City, the lights of New York City, so I couldn't see it very easily anymore. So I turned the telescope back, and I noticed on the same track that something was following Skylab about 90 degrees behind it. And I was like, what in the hell is that? So I followed it with the telescope, and I was like, well, this is smaller, but it's moving the same speed. You know, a satellite to stay up there has to be moving at least 17,500 miles an hour. So I'm watching this thing through the telescope, and at midheaven, all of a sudden it made a 90-degree turn. And I'm watching this. It's just a pinpoint of light through my telescope, but I'm watching it, and I'm watching it make a 90-degree turn at 17,500 miles an hour. And I was like, oh, my God.
She's in a big hurry. Where's the fire?
Yeah, where's the fire? But imagine if you were in your car and you're doing 17,500 miles an hour and you made a 90-degree right turn. You'd go right through you'd be flattened against the side of your car. So anyway, in December 1988, I had the girlfriend from hell, and she was driving, and we were going to Bangor, Maine, and I was living in Maine, which I'm living in Maine now. And we were going to Bangor, and it was around 7 o'clock, and all of a sudden, clear as a bell, telepathically, nobody else was around, just her driving and me in the front passenger seat. I heard the following: we're on a saucer, and we're coming to take you aboard. And of course, I had spent 20 years asking for this, so my heart began to race. I got all excited. I'm looking around like, where's this saucer? What do they mean? They're coming. And I told the girlfriend from hell, and she looked at me like, oh, wow, you're really brain damaged now. And just then off to the northwest, I saw a meteor streak in, and it was just like any meteor that you've ever seen. And it was easily doing, 18,000 miles an hour. And then it just started slowing down until it ended up 100 feet above our car as we were doing 60 miles an hour. And it was a disc 150 feet in diameter. And I say that because the road was about 30 feet wide, and it was 5 times wider than the road. And it was black. Excuse me. And it had 2 huge sausage-like pontoons on the bottom of it. It was like this thing could land on a lake and just float. Except that it was a 150-foot disc, and I would estimate these sausages, these pontoons, were like submarines or something. They're like tanks. They were 30 feet in diameter and 100 feet long, like a gelatin capsule, rounded at both ends. And at the center of each end of each pontoon, which I'm calling a pontoon, I have no idea what it was a giant, like a railroad train headlight, a big sort of whitish, yellowish light, but I would say like 3 feet in diameter at least. It wasn't like a pinpoint spotlight. It was like just this big white light. And at the bottom center of this ship was flashing red, white, and blue light. And at the top of it, as it came in, I was able to see the top of it. It had a strobe light flashing red, white, and blue. So I steered the car over to the side of the road, put my foot on the brake, even though I was in the passenger seat, turned off the ignition, and jumped out of the car and ran towards it and said, beam me up. After all, you've been asking for something for 20 years, and all of a sudden it happens. I mean, this is potentially the most exciting moment of my life. So, meanwhile, the girlfriend from hell jumps out and runs to this house that's all lit up, but there's no cars there. She's banging on the door, help, help, there's UFOs, help, help. And all of a sudden the ship is moved off to the side of the road, and this is in Dedham, Maine, and there's a big lawn there, probably 2 or 3 acres. And I ran into the center of the lawn under the ship, and she was about 150 feet to my left, banging on the door of this white house. Help, help, let me in. And nobody was answering, but all the lights were on. And the bottom of the ship opened up this circle. It's like this, like those old lenses on a camera where the lens opens up and it's all these leaves that open up to make a circle. And this faint green light came down and surrounded me and started picking me up. And at the same time, the green light picked her up off the porch of this house. And so we're both rising through the air up through the bottom of the saucer, and the floor closed again, and I'm standing there, and I look at her, and she's sound asleep on her feet. It's like she's in a trance, like hypnotized or something. And I'm standing there, and this rectangular door to my right opens up, and there's this guy about 6 feet tall, blonde hair, blue eyes. He's got like a long robe on, which it was kind of funny because it looked like Greek or Roman, but it also looked like some of these images that I've seen where people illustrate extraterrestrials that they've met, that they're dressed in long robes. I don't remember that he had a hood on the robe, and he certainly wasn't wearing the hood. But anyway, he reached out his hand, and we shook hands, and that started a 4-hour conversation. And Royce, this guy could walk down any street in the world and not be identified as an extraterrestrial, clearly. And the thing is that by that time I had done a lot of deep meditation and concentration, and I had begun to see auras. So this guy had a white light aura around him that was probably 20 feet wide. So if he were walking down the street and I saw him, I would see that light. Now, a lot of people can't see auras, but some people can. And if I saw him on the street, I would go up to him immediately, because people like that are so unusual and so inspirational and so spiritual that it's just so interesting to talk to them. So from that point of view, the average person wouldn't recognize that he was an extraterrestrial, but I did. I would, even if he was on the street. And I know for a fact that we talked about pole shift because I had had 2 spectacular dreams of the future. One was in 1973, and the other was a waking vision in 1988, just shortly before this saucer came. And
now, hold on a minute, Gordon. Magrady just asked in the chat room if these were Nordics that you were referring to, that look just like humans?
Very Nordic.
Okay.
Very Nordic. Extremely Nordic, like Norwegian or Swedish, or, somebody you'd see in Finland or Denmark. I mean, yeah, identical. And I was talking to him telepathically, and he had a way of just speaking perfect English in my head without my ears hearing it. And all I remember from this conversation, which was 3 or 4 hours, and I know that for several things. He was from the Pleiades. I was reincarnated here from the Pleiades myself, so that's why he contacted me instead of somebody else. And I feel that it's like if you've been there before, that then you have friends in these other places, then they come and look in on you. Like if you had kids in school, you'd go to the school to see how they're doing. That kind of thing. And the one thing I remember was that he told me everything I thought was true, but I wouldn't remember anything that we talked about because a lot of things are in the hands of man, and there's probable futures. And as we go through the day and through the months and the year, we change our future. And so if I said, well, this X, Y, and Z is going to happen, and instead intervening events made it so that ABC happened, then I would be wrong. So rather than have me say something that wouldn't be true, I would just remember that I had the experience, but I wouldn't remember what was said exactly. And then all of a sudden, the ex-girlfriend and I were back in the center of the floor, and we were lowered back to the ground, just lifted slowly back down to the ground. And she woke up instantly and ran towards her car, And I looked over at the house where she was, and all the lights were out, but there were tons of cars in the driveway. It was like there's maybe a dozen people living in this huge white house. And so then I talked to a psychic about what had happened, and I had a hypnotic regression, which I recorded, and this woman hypnotized me to relive, and she was very concerned over what was the name of this person. And I found that hard to put into words, because I remember talking to this person, but I didn't ask his name. It's like I was just talking to him. It was just him and me talking. And on the tape of me reliving this experience, I say that his name is Kos. And I found that interesting because I'd never heard that name, and I don't know how it's spelled, C-O-S or K-O-S. And then about 5 years later, there was a story about a blue light was seen over Camp David, and some psychic or ET channel or whatever wrote an article that was on the internet that said the Pleiadian ambassador to Earth, Kos, was meeting with the president, Bill Clinton. So I found that really interesting because she named that person in the article and said he was the Pleiadian ambassador to Earth. So I don't know, but that I met the Pleiadian ambassador to Earth. But anyway, I went to the psychic who does soul readings, and she said, you know, you've never had a partner on your wavelength. And fortunately, I had been praying to God, saying, please, would you have this girlfriend from hell run off with some other man? Because I know it would be an awful thing if I broke up with her. It'd be much better if she broke up with me. And sure enough, she met this guy and moved off to Idaho with him. So I was single again. And the psychic said, you've never had a girlfriend on your wavelength or a partner. She goes, why don't you make up a list and ask the ETs for exactly what you want? So I thought, well, I'm 6'2", and I am half Scottish and half Sicilian, and I love women that I've met that are half Scottish and half Scandinavian, and I'd like a tall blonde, please, as long as I'm getting to make up the list myself. I thought, well, 6 foot tall, blonde, blue eyes, psychic, sees UFOs, loves animals, at home in the city or the country, really intelligent, artistic, kind, great sense of humor. So I had this whole list, and I would go out at night and look up at the stars and repeat the list and ask if the Space Brothers, quote unquote, would help me find a partner. And a year later, because I don't drink, so I don't go to bars, and I lived on a small fishing village at the end of a small island, and I figured if they're going to find one for me, they'll make it possible for me to meet her, but I'm not going to go out and just try and go pick up somebody locally or meet somebody locally or something like that. So I got 2 different groups called me up a year later and said, would you come and speak to us about your UFO experiences and about extraterrestrials? And I said, sure. And when I went to the second lecture, that's when I met Janet. And I recognized her instantly, and I started talking to her, and we got along great. And then I went home from our first date, which she had suggested that we climb a mountain in the national park together. And it was October 1990, and the leaves were beautiful, and it was a blue sky. And this is islands in the Gulf of Maine. It's all salt water. And I went home, and I thought, there's no way that I'm driving an hour and a half each way to date this girl. So I went back the next day, and I found her, and I said, get your things, you're moving in with me. And now, 22 years later, here we are, and she's sitting next to me.
Hi.
So tell them some of your experiences as a child with otherworldly things and extraterrestrials and things like that leading up to when we met.
Well, as a child, I was always interested in space and UFOs, and I always would tell people I wanted to buy a UFO or have one built and go to the moon with my animals, because I always loved animals. And so at about age 4, I was in my bedroom, and over by the window, I always had a cat, and I had a black cat at this time. And I was looking at my cat, and it shape-shifted into an ET, and then right back into a cat again. So I tell people, and they thought that was cute, like I had, imagination. So over the years, as I grew old, I have a lot of UFO dreams, when I was younger. And then over the years, when I got to be a teenager, we'd have parties at a picnic area, or it was a part of the park, Acadia National Park, and we'd have picnics and parties, and there was always somebody there that would talk about UFOs, that they had seen them off the coast, that they'd gone to rescue a boat, and it would speed off into the sky, and so it was definitely a UFO, and I'd hear these stories and thought, oh no, I wonder if that's true. And so then I kind of forgot it all, and I did, as I got on in years, and then it was like, I had met Gordon in 1990, and after I had met him that first night, I went home and started dreaming about UFOs again, and so it was all coming back to me, and then after a year of being with Gordon, I went to bed. It was June 9th.
No, that was 6 months later.
6 months later, June 9th.
You had seen the UFO with your mother once.
Oh, yeah, when I was 18, yeah. We were in Seal Cove, we were walking, and my mother looked and said, is that a UFO? And I said, I don't know. And she had grown up near Limestone, Maine, where there was a lot of UFO sightings when she was growing up. So,
that was our nuclear strategic bomber base for B-52s.
Yeah, and there was, over the years, there were a lot of UFO incidents.
Right.
So I said, oh, I don't know. And so then the first one I really got to see was in June 9th of 91. And I was dreaming I was on board one ship, and Gordon was there, and somebody else was laying in the background against the ship. It was a curved wall.
Another person.
So
there were three humans.
Three of us,
and a lot of extraterrestrials.
So these extraterrestrials were very tall, and I'd say 7 feet, and they had hoods on, so I couldn't see their faces, and they were in brown robes. Very tall, but very intelligent. And I couldn't understand what they were trying to tell Gordon. Gordon had already written half a book. And they wanted to tell him more things to put in his book. But it was a lot of technology that I didn't understand. So I was in the background, sort of like behind Gordon, but I could see these ETs. And I could see, looking out the window of the ship and all these controls and things like that. And I kept begging in my mind. I said, please let me see you when I'm awake. I've been dreaming of you.
Yeah, because this was out of body.
Right.
And I didn't know I was anywhere. As far as I knew, I was asleep in my bed, and that's that. And you're telling me that I was out of body talking to 7-foot-tall extraterrestrials, and you're standing there saying, instead of just seeing you in my dreams, can I see you physically?
Right. And I said, I've been made fun of over the years with UFO stuff, and I just really would love to see you. I think that would make such a difference. So, it was about 3 in the morning, and I got up, and I thought, well, that was an interesting dream. And I noticed my black cat was sleeping right on my chest, and he never did that. So it was like he knew I was out of body. So I got up and everything was really quiet. So I go downstairs and I notice the door's open except the screen door is closed. So it's a little cool. So I go to close it and I look out the door and there just above a small tree.
Maple tree
is a saucer-shaped UFO. And I thought, oh my God, thank you. I thanked it and thanked it. I said, please let me wake up Gordon first. Because I was a little scared to go out. I thought, oh God, what if they take me and I'm not going to come back? So I went and woke Gordon up, and I said, Gordon, you've got to come out. And he goes, oh, no, it's just the northern light.
Yeah,
and
skeptic.
I said, yeah.
The skeptic.
I said, no, you've got to come out. They said they'd wait. So he came out, and it was still in the same place.
It was a 30-foot disc. It was like a stainless steel color, and the air around it was ionized orange. And it was just like a boat at anchor riding a little waves. So it was sort of like bobbing sort of above this maple tree. And the maple tree is probably about 25 feet tall, and this thing's about 10 feet above that. And there's this 30-foot stainless steel metal disc. That's the color of it. And the air is ionized bright orange. And then as it wobbled a little bit, you could see there was a dome on the top of it, and the air around the dome was ionized a bright red. And I mean, we're standing at the house, maybe 50 feet from this thing, looking at it basically in our yard, not on the ground, but in our yard. And it was the single most spiritual experience. It was as if you're standing there and an angel came from heaven. I mean, the only feeling I had was of unconditional love. It was, it's a silly word, but awesome. I mean, it was awe-inspiring, it was inspirational, it was spiritual. And we just stood there watching it for, what do you think, 20 minutes?
20 minutes, and I kept thanking them. I mean, I was so happy to see this because it changed my whole life. And I didn't care what anybody said about me seeing UFOs. I knew they were there, and it didn't matter.
Now you had the proof between the connection with the out-of-body. See, she can remember every dream she ever has, all her out-of-body trips, whereas I only remember a few from time to time. She remembers all of them.
And I probably had over 3,000 clear UFO dreams. But anyway, the guy that we think was on the side of the ship asleep was the minister that lived not too far from us, because Gordon had gone over there the next morning to tell him the experience we had.
Because he had told us once before that he had seen UFOs. And what did he say? I forget what he said. He felt that he was on a ship or something?
Yeah, he said, I had a dream I was on a ship last night.
Yeah. And but he didn't remember anything. And of course, I didn't remember being on the ship, but clearly there it was in our yard, So that was the beginning. That was 6 months after we met. And then as time went on, we just started seeing all kinds of things. Like, we went to look for UFOs one night, and then we went to Bangor the next day, and on the way back, we didn't see anything. But we thought, well, maybe you can call them in, For all we know, you can go to a good spot where nobody would see what was going on except us. And because there's lots of wilderness around here, and these little saltwater coves with a rocky shore or a little pocket beach. And so we would pick a spot and go there and try and call in saucers, as if you can ask a whole starship full of ETs to come and display themselves for you. But so we were coming back from Bangor, and there was I'd say it was a 50-foot silver ball bearing about a mile west of where we were stopped at a stop sign. And it's very near to here, and we were looking at it, and it was like a mirror. It was a mirror ball. It was seamless, and it's just sitting there in the sky. And we looked at it, and we probably stayed at the stop sign. And it was funny because nobody came along. It was a T intersection. Nobody passed in front of us, and nobody came up from behind us. And
okay, I meant to tell everybody at the very beginning of the show that Gordon has connection problems. He's up there in Maine, and in the area he lives in, the internet connection is not the best. And he did tell me prior to the show starting, I was supposed to tell y'all, and by the time I started the show, I'd run myself behind and blew my mind and forgot to tell you that we may lose him, and if we do, I'll be calling him back and getting him back on the line. Gordon, are you still there?
Yeah. Do you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you now, but it sounds like you were losing your connection.
Well, it's a shared connection, so if somebody tries to download a couple of Netflix movies, that can affect. But I have silver bars on the Skype now, so that's good. So there was a silver ball in the sky, and we were watching it for 20 minutes, and we made a left turn to go home, and we went down the street a little bit because there was a valley there that was over this valley. And we went down and to this restaurant, and we looked over the restaurant to see where it was, and it's gone. And then, I don't know if it was that night or the next night, all the windows in the house started ringing. And I said, well, that's the wind. And Janet goes, it's not the wind. The wind doesn't blow on all sides all at once. That's an earthquake. And so we turned on the TV and the radio, and we couldn't get anything locally about an earthquake. So we kept tuning through the AM band, and we finally got that there was an earthquake in Pennsylvania that was felt as far north as Maine. And that's what had shaken all our storm windows on this old house we owned at that time. And it seemed to me that there was a connection, that this silver ball was over that valley, maybe monitoring this quake that was open. I have no idea. But it always interested us. There was this connection that's where the silver ball was, and that's as far north as the quake was felt. So...
Now, this happened after you were moved into your house in Maine?
Oh, yeah, we were living together in Maine in a small fishing village at the end of a peninsula. There's an island, and then at the southern tip of the island, that's where we had this old Victorian house. And we were off the island heading home when we saw this silver ball bearing in the sky, and it was 50 feet in diameter, and it was just sitting there as if it was just part of the sky. I mean, you know, it was a blue sky. It was late in the afternoon. The sun was reflecting off of it, and we didn't have binoculars or a camera, but if we could have, taken a picture of it, it would have been like a picture of a mirror ball hanging in your yard. I mean, that's exactly what it looked like. So that's what I say is Jen and I have seen over 36 ships, and no two of them are alike at all.
I had my dream of the UFO and actually woke up to see it. After a few months, different people would tell us that they saw ships over our house, the different neighbors. And one actually tried to come and tell us about it, and they would not allow him to come out. They would make him forget why he was coming out the door.
Oh, that's a great story. There's this guy, Ron, that was really interested in UFOs, and that's why we had a group that met every month for 18 years. And he had sought us out. Somebody said, well, if you're interested in UFOs, you've got to talk to Gordon and Janet. So then his wife went to Cape Cod and never came back, met some other guy, and when she came back with her new boyfriend and kicked him out. So we got him a place to live across the street. So we used to see him quite a bit. And he said, well, I've seen ETs. I've had grays in my room, but I've never seen a saucer. I would love to see a saucer. He was renting the upstairs apartment in this house across the street from our house. And he woke up in the middle of the night one night, and he sat up in bed and looked right through the windows at our house, and there was this huge 45-foot diameter disc over our house. And it was the bottom half of it was pink, half of it was blue. Now, people have told me, and I've read in various places, that when you see an orange disc, the orange colors, that is the Zetas, the human little unselfish grays from Zeta Reticuli. That's their color ships. It ionizes orange. But when you see blue and pink, those are ships from the Pleiades. But anyway, so he looks out the window and he goes, oh my God, and he looks at the saucer, and it's tilted in an angle, so if you were to draw a line right from the center of the bottom to our upstairs bedroom, it was perfectly in line. And he's like, oh my God, because he was fearful. He was like, well, and he goes, I've got to warn Gordon and Janet. Something's happening to them. I've got to tell them there's a saucer over the house. I've got to wake them up. And of course, he didn't have the money at that time for a phone. And it was January, so he wanted to come and tell us, but it was like, 10 below zero, and there was snow on the ground. So he went into the kitchen, where there was some hooks where he kept his coat and his boots. So he put on his boots, he put on his coat, and he's like, I've got to tell Gordon and Janet. I've got to tell them. I've got to warn them. And he goes over and puts his hand on the doorknob, because it was upstairs, and actually to leave his apartment, there was not an interior staircase. There was like a little landing outside and an exterior staircase. And he put his hand on the doorknob, and at the exact moment he did that, he forgot what he was doing. And he looked down and he goes, why in the hell do I have my boots and my coat on at 3 in the morning? Where was I going? So he goes, geez, what's wrong with me? So he takes off his coat, he takes off his boots, he goes back in the bedroom, and he looks across the street, and he goes, "Oh my God, there's a..." Well, I might as well go to the bathroom. So he goes to the bathroom, and he goes, "What was I doing up?" So he's still got his coat and boots on, and he goes back into the bedroom and goes, "Oh my God, I've been trying to tell Gordon and Janet. Why haven't I told them yet?" And he goes back in the kitchen, and as soon as he gets in the kitchen, he forgets totally what he's doing. So he goes, I guess I'll make myself a cup of coffee. So he puts the tea kettle on, and he's making some coffee, and he makes the coffee, and he goes back in the bedroom, and he looks, and he goes, "Oh my God, I'm trying to warn Gordon and Janet. I can't do it. What's wrong with this?" And he goes back in, puts his hand on the doorknob again, and forgets all about it. And he goes, now he takes his coat and his boots off, and he's got the coffee in his hand, and he's thinking, "What am I doing up so late?" He goes, I think I'll just go back in the bedroom and finish my coffee. So he goes back in the bedroom with his coffee, and he goes, "Oh my God, there's this huge saucer. And the whole time, Royce, this thing is at a 45-degree angle. It's not straight or flat. It's at a 45-degree angle with the bottom center pointed at the upstairs bedroom in our old Victorian house that we had." And so he goes, "Damn." So he goes, "Well, I'm not going to try and go out anymore because obviously they don't want me to go over there." So he just sat down on the floor in front of his window, put the coffee mug on the windowsill, and watched it until he finished the coffee. And then he had this overwhelming urge to go to sleep. So he just got right up from the floor and crawled in bed and went right to sleep. And then he forgot about it till the afternoon of the next day. And then he came running over and he goes, "You're not going to believe it. I was trying to warn you last night." And Janet and I are like, "Well, did something happen?"
She looked really worn out, let me tell you.
So what do you think of that, Royce?
Wow, sounds like he got the full scared out of him, didn't he?
He was a nervous type anyway.
Yeah, he was nervous, yeah.
So, then the next experience that I had with UFOs was, I was down in Brooks, Maine with Gina, our friend, and we had to go to the vet for the dog that got into a porcupine.
Her dog face was full of porcupine.
So it was about midnight, and we drove to the emergency vet and into Camden. And Gina, on the way back, Gina said, "Did you just see that in the sky?" And I said, "No, I wasn't looking in the sky." She goes, "I think that was a UFO." So we're going back through the woods in Brooks. It's quite remote. It's about 20 minutes from Camden. And we're going up over the hill just before you go into Brooks. And there's a perfect dish-shaped...
No, triangle.
Triangular shape UFO came right down over her car. Just as close
with you in it?
Yeah, with us in it, in the car. And it had lights along the side. It had a big red light in the middle. And it just stayed there. And we were so excited. We were trying to talk to him and say hi to him.
Didn't you say it was as if 3 city buses were parked to make a perfect triangle? That's how thick it was.
Yeah, and it was very big. So we were real excited because she had also seen UFOs in the past. So we were trying to talk to him and was hoping for some contact. And then a car, you could see a car from quite a distance coming towards us on the road with the headlights on. So we thought, oh God, I'd probably take off. And sure enough, it went across the field really quick. But Gina said, "Let's go across the field and try to catch it." I said, "Gina, I don't think your car's going to make it. You never know what's in a field like that." So we just wished it goodbye and then went back and told Gordon and her husband all about it. And we were real excited. And then her and I both saw that same circular saucer that I had seen with Gordon coming home from Bangor, the big round one. We had seen that together not far from where Gordon and I had seen it. And that was a few months later. Then the next one was when we were doing a big meditation in Blue Hill. What was the name of what was that?
Oh yeah, it was a full moon. We had about 30 people at this town park in Blue Hill, Maine, and there was a guy there who was Jewish, but he felt the urge to sing the Lord's Prayer, which I didn't know you could sing the Lord's Prayer. But sure enough, he sang it, and we all stood around in a circle holding hands, and we're looking up at the sky, because before he did that, I said, well, let's see if we can call in a ship. And, which I guess is sort of presumptuous that, they're going to drop everything to go do something. But anyway, we're standing there all looking up at the sky, and all of a sudden this meteor really high up started streaking across the sky, and it got to about the midheaven, and then it zigzagged 10 times. Probably, in the arc of the sky, probably zigzagged 10 degrees to the right, then 20 degrees to the left, then 20 degrees to the right, and then finally it straightened out again. And all of this apparently at 18,000 miles an hour. So we were like, wow, and the thing was that people had asked us over time, would you help us see a saucer? And we said, well, ask them yourself, and we'll ask them too, and see if you can see an extraterrestrial or a saucer. So her brother Larry said that, and he's dead now, but he had, right after that, he had these blue lights about the size of a honeydew melon, like a cotton ball, but bright blue, the most beautiful blue, going down the hallways in his house. And Janet you've seen that.
I've seen those too, and those are really exciting to see. I've seen them where there's no windows at all, so there's nothing from outside. And I've pretty much lived in the country most of my life, except when I've traveled. So it's really nothing from outside, but this was inside, these beautiful bouncing blue spheres just bouncing around the hallway and coming into my room. And I love seeing those. I think that they just feel so, incredible.
It's like they're here, but somehow they're like the size of a melon, but they look like a fuzzy cotton ball, but the most beautiful blue you've ever seen in your life.
And when I first started seeing saucers too, I'd get this buzzing sound in the house or wherever I was.
In your ears.
In my ears, but it was like it was in the house, like there was a bee's nest in the house. And then I'd go, yep, I'm going to be seeing one tonight. But I don't do that. That doesn't happen.
Another time it was in the early fall, and we were getting ready to go to bed, and we'd been watching TV downstairs in the living room, and we were upstairs, and it was sort of a warm night, and we had the window open, and all of a sudden we heard two beings talk to each other in a language we have never heard. And I'm not talking Chinese or Korean or Cambodian, something like that. No, this was a way of talking with sound that was unlike anything we've ever heard, and it definitely was not an animal. And it was like as if there were two extraterrestrials, because we're up on the second floor. There were two extraterrestrials on the ground in our backyard under our window talking about us. And probably they were saying, well, they're going to go to sleep soon. I mean, I don't know what that was all about, but Janet and I go, well, that's probably some extraterrestrials in the backyard. No need to investigate. And we went right to sleep. And we don't really remember anything particularly happening that night, right?
Right. But going back to the Blue Hill incident in the park, on our way home, Gordon, when we left, we were coming home, and on the...
about a mile away up the hill, there's a four-way intersection, and we get up there, and all of a sudden, these giant floodlights snapped on, and this whole intersection is like so brightly lit that the light is so bright white that you could barely see anything, and it was coming from above. So we pull over and we look up, and there is a 100-foot polished stainless steel cigar over our heads. And down the bottom of it, with no wings, no engines, no noise, nothing, on the bottom of it, it had this row of spotlights that were lighting up the whole intersection. And on either side were rows of rectangular windows with white light coming out of that. And we were looking in the windows as best we could, and we couldn't see anybody or anything. It was just this white light. So it was this huge cigar shape, and it was probably doing like 5 to 10 miles an hour.
It was falling right along with our car, and I could almost reach out and touch it from the passenger side window.
Seemed like
it seemed like
it was probably about 75 feet up, 100 feet up, no more than that.
But it was so
But it was
big.
100 feet long, and it was probably 30 feet in diameter, and it had tapered ends that were rounded, and the whole thing was like polished like a mirror of metal, and so you can see that we've had these interesting experiences, and no two of them are alike.
And during that time in Blue Hill, they had a metaphysical bookstore that had a lot of UFO books in it. And the guy that owned that had a lot of sightings in Blue Hill at the time. So there's other people in the area that also have seen UFOs. And
we met a woman from Pumpkin Island, which is in Penobscot Bay. And it turns out that the whole shoreline of Maine used to be connected to the west coast of Scotland. And millions of years ago, they broke apart. And so if you walk from the mainland towards the beach, and then you got on a boat and went to Scotland and continued walking up the beach in Scotland, it's the same terrain. It's the same geology. It's the same exact thing. But when it cracked off, there was this huge upwelling of magma that was very rich in ore, and all kinds of metal ore. So within 5 miles of our house, there's probably 150 gold mines at one time. And people have said over and over, we met people that said that they would see saucers zoom in from space and become first visible over Lincolnville Beach in Maine, heading northeast, and then go over Pumpkin Island Light, which is a Coast Guard lighthouse, and then turn. So it was like, we always wondered, do they use that vein of metal? Because from Lincolnville Beach through Pumpkin Island Light on a straight line right to Canada, there's commercial grade every metal in the world. There's nickel, gold, silver, zinc, lead, zirconium, beryllium, any metal that you can think of, and iron, huge. It's commercial grade. I mean, you could just have one big open pit gold mine from Lincolnville Beach to Canada, about 200 miles, and they've tried to open up mines, but nobody wants mines anymore. So all the original gold mines closed, and nobody's been able to do mining. But in New Brunswick, they did try and open up a huge nickel mine, but the people in New Brunswick, Canada, didn't want that either. So, but anyway, we always wondered if that was like, if you're navigating a saucer, is it easier to follow a line of metal in the earth, sort of like a runway, or sort of like runway markers? And that way you know exactly where you are, and that helps in some way to navigate. And then they would slow down until they got to Pumpkin Island Light and then turn. And we had met the woman who lived on Pumpkin Island. I forget whether she was the lightkeeper or she was married to the lightkeeper, or there's a couple other houses there. She might have just had a house there. But she said all the time she would see saucers all of a sudden materialize over Lincolnville Beach about 15 miles away and zoom in and slow down until they got to Pumpkin Island Light and then turn, and they usually turned northwest. So we never really did figure out how that works, but I've always thought that when you navigate a saucer that you not only navigate the location but also the time.
Right.
It seems to me that if you can go faster than the speed of light, then you're sort of outside of our realm as we know it. And you would not only navigate to a location, but also you could pick the time to arrive. But that's just a theory.
Yeah. Well, since speaking of time, it's like 1 minute or two. We've been on here for about an hour now. I was going to suggest, why don't we take a break? Perhaps you and your wife, or perhaps one of the guests or somebody could use a pause for the cause or something there. And why don't we come back in about roughly 3 minutes?
Yeah, and that way you're going to put this on YouTube, so you could break it into 3 one-hour shows.
Well, actually, I might be able to upload it in one on YouTube, but I know for a fact that Emotion is going to require me to break it into 3 or more. I'm not sure about the other places.
Okay. Well, thanks, Royce. We'll be here in 3 minutes.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Okay, everybody, we're back now, and now would be a good time for anybody that wanted to call in and ask some questions, because I know about 20 minutes ago, somebody in the chat room mentioned that they wanted to call in and ask some questions and wanted to know when would be a good time, and I mentioned to them in the chat room that I thought after the 2 o'clock break would be a good time so we could get to a stopping point. So if you're wanting to call in, we're waiting for the call now. And in the meantime, is there anything you guys want to say?
Oh, yeah. I want to tell you about a really interesting incident that involves several different people. But this will just give you an idea of how different each incident that we've had is. So it's really hard to say, and then I know, there's... on your conspiracy theory UFO Yahoo group, there was some discussion about that, somebody wanted me to get evidence, to proof. And if you're listening to me, you see, what kind of proof am I going to get? Am I just going to walk over to a desk and take a sledgehammer and break open like the control panel and take that with me when I leave? I mean, not really. You know what I mean? And, so I don't, with all these millions or thousands and perhaps millions, probably millions of UFO incidents, what proof is there? And that raises the question, isn't that part of their plan, the ET's plan, to not have proof? So why is that? And I think I've come up with an explanation, which is that so some people can feel safe in being skeptical, because the whole idea of extraterrestrial scares the hell out of them. Whereas I feel it's more like, let's say you took a trip to a country where you've never been before, and you'd be interested in everything you see, and it'd all be different but yet similar, So anyway, this incident was about, I think it was around 92 or 93, and this same person that Janet was talking about, she saw the triangle ship with Gina. Gina and her husband had rented a house on a lake, and it was in the late fall, and ice was beginning to form on this lake. And this lake is probably about 5 miles long, so it's a good-sized lake. And the ice was beginning to form. It was about 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch thick when they first noticed the first circle. And this house they rented was on a hill looking down at the lake about 100 feet away, and there was a little cove there, and just sort of at the entrance to the cove, out on the ice, too far for anyone to walk, and it would have been impossible anyway, because if the ice is 1/4 to 1/2 inch thick, how do you walk on it? Most people don't feel safe unless there's 4 to 6 inches of ice. And it's a deep lake, so you don't want to take a chance. Anyway, they woke up in the morning, and there was a perfect 30-foot diameter circle in the ice. And the circle was as if it was melted 1/4 of an inch deep, 6 inches wide, making a perfect circle on the ice. And in the center of the circle was a 6-inch deep hole that had frozen over. So, a 6 inches wide. So it was like this circle and a dot. So then the next morning they woke up, and there were like 3 circles in the ice, and between the center hole of all 3 of them was a 6-inch wide, 1/4 of an inch deep straight line. So making like a symbol, almost like a triangle, except it wasn't an equilateral triangle. And every morning there were more and more circles, and they all were connected. The center of each circle had lines going to the center of all the other circles, so it was like spokes on a wheel. And they had dogs, and they tried to walk out on the ice, and it was still too thin to support a person. So how are these circles made at night? And I don't know if I know you, Royce, have read a lot about UFOs, and you've perhaps heard of ice circles before, but...
Can you hold on just a second? I'm going to answer that caller's calling in now.
Okay.
Hello, caller, you're on the air. And Gordon, I apologize for interrupting you like that. That just worked out to be bad timing.
I'll just get back to ice circles after the call.
Okay. So, is this Mayreed?
How can I turn off the sound without turning off the sound here? Are we getting feedback or anything? Yeah, this is Marie.
Yeah, I can hear you in the your computer in the background. Can you mute the player on the web page? It should have a mute button.
Where?
To the right of the arrow, almost to the very right side where the volume bar is. There's a little speaker-looking button. It's on the player itself on the page, and if you mouse over it, it says mute.
I don't see it, honey.
I've read a lot about UFOs.
No.
Are you using Internet Explorer?
No, I use Firefox.
That might be why you don't see it. Okay, can you pause the show
I'll pause
until you get off the phone call?
Okay. How are we going now?
Good.
There, now I don't hear myself in the background anymore.
Thank you. I'm not real great with this technical stuff. First, I'd like to say I'm a 6 foot long and I like UFOs. It's nice to meet you, James and Janet.
Hi.
I've had some interaction with UFOs, not half as many as you all have, but maybe it's just that I don't remember them. I did want to, you did mention earlier about how you can travel to the UFOs and interact with them in your astral body, and I think that's what happened to me not too long ago. It was an interaction with the Greys. I was taken into what looked like a nursery, and they came up to me with a hybrid half gray, half blonde human baby that was crying, and told me they didn't know why the baby was crying. They had been singing lullabies to it, but their voices sounded like, really high-pitched squeals, and it had scared the baby. So I took the baby and I put my face up next to it and I sang it a lullaby, and it finally went to sleep. And then I told them that they needed to slow their cadence and lower their pitch so it would be more soothing to the human ear. And then, I kind of wake up in my bed from having what I first thought is like this really vivid dream, but I'm feeling, kind of, like disoriented. And, I
what
think.
What a great story, by the way, Maggie.
Yeah.
Great story.
I was going to get into all my UFO experiences.
She's going to talk about hers in a little while.
About alien babies. I've been introduced by the babies and what their name, the babies.
Maybe we've met there. I get to go to the nursery a lot, apparently.
Well, do you feel when you held the baby that it was yours?
No, honey, I don't think it was. I'm way too old to be producing babies.
But your eggs may be young enough to produce babies.
Well, when I was younger, they would...
Don't talk over her.
When I was younger, they'd take me up on the ship and tell me this was my baby and tell me the name of it and what the whole...
Yeah. Oh, there was another thing, too. You were talking earlier about the voices that you heard in the strange language.
Yes.
I've been talking a weird language in my sleep from time to time, and I haven't been able to identify it. I have a couple of the recordings, and I was wondering if I could play one for you.
It's up to Royce.
I don't mind if you play one. I'm not sure how you're going to do it.
Well, I can play it. Because we'd get like a reverb thing here, huh?
Well, I don't know about that. I just don't know if it'll reach up on the air, but you can try it.
Okay, I'll give it a go. And if not, I can email the file to you so you could hear it. I got to click everything down here. But I've been having this language in my sleep, and my husband's going, I don't know, maybe it's French or maybe it's Gaelic. Yeah, he doesn't know. So come on, everybody, get off of here. I'm trying to get to my files. This is not working.
If you can manage to play it through Skype, it should come out.
Yeah, I'm trying to get to my file so I can get to it and play it. But apparently it's...
Well, I know I had a previous lifetime in Russia. I was living in a monastery. I was a monk. And I was living in New York City about 1970, and it was a beautiful spring day, and I stepped out from this building into the sunlight, and all of a sudden, this poem in Russian came to me, which I can't pronounce or speak anything in Russian. I have never studied it. I've read very few books by Russian authors. I don't even know how they think. And I stepped out onto the street, and I recited a whole poem in Russian and I knew it was about what a beautiful spring day it was, and it just blew my mind. I didn't even know how that happened.
Yeah. I don't usually have anything like that happen to me when I'm wide awake. It's like when I'm half asleep, because I will wake up with the words coming out of my mouth and not know exactly what I'm saying. It never comes to me what it means. Let me see if I can...
Well, I hope you keep a recorder near the bed all the time, see if you can get enough of it.
I do sometimes, and sometimes I don't. Like if the air conditioner's on, I really get really bad. See, no, that shouldn't be it. I'm trying to find the file. I've got a couple of voice recordings here of different things. But yeah, it started bothering my husband. Maybe this is it.
Well, now, when you talk about contact with alien babies, how do your friends and family and your spouse respond to that?
Well, my husband's pretty much a skeptic, but he knows that I don't make stuff up. You know, he does trust me, but he's the type. I also deal, I work in the paranormal field, and he doesn't really believe in that. However, I recently did get him to believe in Reiki because I healed him of using Reiki, an arm condition, a shoulder condition he's had for like 10 years.
Wow.
Darn it. Wish I could find this stupid file. Okay, I'm going to try this one. No. Thought I had it marked. Oh, here they are.
Well, I think if you don't find it soon, then we'll just
No, I found it. I found it. Here it is.
Okay.
That's it. That was about it. I took the one portion of what I was talking about.
That almost sounds Russian or Eastern European, really.
Well, there was one part in it, did you hear it, that sounded a little metallic? Like,
That's what I thought.
Yeah, it's not, and this is the one that bothered me. The other one, yeah, it could be a foreign language, but this one has that one portion in it that sounded a little metallic, and I'm going, there wasn't anything going on. It wasn't like my radio in the bedroom or something going off. I don't have anything like that in there, and that's the part that kind of bothered me. But yeah, I guess it could be Russian or some other Slavic language. But I've sent it around to different people, linguists and stuff, and nobody's been able to identify this yet. But thank you for listening.
Well, that was really interesting, Maggie. Thank you.
Where did you say you got that at again, Maggie?
I recorded it when I was speaking in my sleep, and I do this from time to time. Weird languages come out of me while I'm in my sleep.
So that was you speaking and it sounded metallic?
Yes.
Yes. Evidently, yes. And like I said,
I'd be freaking out.
Yeah. Well, when I did interact with the aliens when I was in the nursery, that's kind of how their voices were kind of high-pitched, weird-sounding, metallic-sounding voices. So maybe that was it. I don't know. But it is in my waking state. It's a little hard to, put into perspective because there's, me in my real life, and I wash my dishes and go out to lunch or whatever, and then there's like another part of me that works in a nursery and deals with aliens, and so, and then there's the Reiki master who just works to try to heal people. So it's kind of hard to put in my own perspective, but I certainly do appreciate your input on it.
Well, Maggie, would you mind if after the show through Royce that Janet and I are able to get in touch with you? Maybe he'll share your Skype name or your email address. Would that be okay with you?
Oh, yeah.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Now back to the show. Thank you so much. And
Wait, Maggie, didn't you have another question though about astral bodies?
Yeah, I did mention that. That's when I went to the nursery. I must have gone in my astral body because I was laying there in bed, and like you said, your cat was laying on your chest. My dog, I have a little doggy, and he was right on top of me when I woke up.
Yeah, the animals know you're leaving your body, and they don't want you to go. They're thinking, well, where is she? Is she going to come back? And so they hang on for dear life. Like, if I could hold on to you tighter, would you stay?
Yeah. I think that's probably it. My dog's really very attached to me, so I can understand about your kitty laying on your chest, too. Thank you so much for your input, and I'll be listening to the rest of the show.
Well, that was very interesting, Maggie.
Thanks for calling in, Maggie.
You're welcome.
So,
I'm so glad she identified her name, so now I can feel more comfortable just saying
Yeah,
Maggie.
Maggie's a lot easier to say than Mayreed.
Yeah.
But you see, Mayreed is Celtic for Margaret, and Maggie is short for Margaret, so it all works out fine. See you later. Well, I'll be listening.
okay.
Thanks, Maggie.
So, getting back to these ice circles, so this couple that we know, and we've already named the wife, so we'll continue to name it, Gina. She and her husband would, at that time, and you've got to remember this is 91 or 92, maybe even 93, they would go to Florida for the winter. So they had arranged to, I don't know if it was to rent something or stay with people they knew or whatever, but go to Florida. So they wanted to leave their dogs at the house, and they knew these twins that lived in Blue Hill, and they said, would one of them, so one of them agreed, and her name was Tracy, and they said, would you agree to house sit the dogs while we go to Florida for 2 weeks in January? So she agreed. So they went to Florida. So she's staying in this house on the lake. They didn't tell her what those ice circles were. And as the ice thickened and it would snow and it would rain and melt a little bit, it was almost indistinguishable. And eventually I did get to walk, Janet and I both got to walk out on the ice and look at these circles, and there was no way to figure how they would have been made. But I figured if these saucers were hiding from the radar in Bangor, there was a line of ridges in between this lake and Bangor, and that little cove would be a perfect spot for them to rest if they wanted to get out of the sight of radar. They could sort of rest themselves on the ice. I mean, if they're floating through the sky, I guess they have the secrets of gravity figured out, and maybe the bottom of them was warm, and that's why they could land on 1/4 of an inch of ice or 1/2 inch of ice and melt in lines that were 6 inches wide from the heat of the vehicle. So I really don't know. But anyway, at one point, Tracy woke up in the middle of the night, and she's in the house. She's by herself. The dogs are there. She's taking care of them. And she sees this light outside her window, and she sits up in bed, and this blue light from outside comes through the glass into the room. And I never did get a description of whether it was another honeydew melon-sized fuzzy cotton ball of blue or what it was, but this blue light came into the room through the window, scared the hell out of her. She went screaming downstairs in her pajamas, ran out the front door, didn't even close it. It was January, jumped in her car and drove off. And she called up our friends in Florida and said, I'm never going back to that house. Something happened in that house that scared me so much that I'm never going back. And so somebody else, somehow they made some arrangement that somebody had to go over, close the door, and take care of the dogs. And so, but I didn't know, I knew about that at the time. So then, about, I guess it was about a year later, it was a full moon in October, and the moon was very bright, but there were clouds and there were little sprinkles. Some of the clouds were sprinkles, like sprinkling rain. And somebody had asked me, I would get this a lot, that people would call me up and say, would you come and speak to our group? Like I'd go speak to a meditation group, or there'd be some person was having people over and wanted me to come and talk about extraterrestrials. So I had arranged to speak to 2 separate groups on this Sunday. And I had a old Toyota pickup at the time, and I drove it up to Penobscot, and I went to a cornfield where there was a log cabin where my friend Larry at the time was renting this log cabin, and he wanted to go with me to both places where I was going to speak. So we went to the first place, and that was the very famous Helen Nearing, who's now deceased. But she and her husband, Scott Nearing, are famous for these books, Living the Good Life, about growing your own vegetables, eating off the land, building houses out of stone. And and you can look that up, Helen and Scott Nearing, Nearing, and Living the Good Life. So we went over there, and then we went over to Northeast Harbor, which is over on Mount Desert Island where the national park is, and there was a meditation group, and I spoke to them. And so we came back, and it was at 10:30 at night, Sunday night, and Larry was driving, and he got out of the car to go back to the cabin to go to bed, and I got out of the car to get in my truck. So I get in my truck, and I'm pulling out of this cornfield onto the road, and I realize that I'm on empty. And the gas gauge is so far down that there's no way that I can make it 25 miles to go home. And I realized there was a gas station just 4 miles north of where I was, but that it was closed on Sunday nights. So I'm driving up to the stop sign with the main highway, and I'm going from the east towards the west, and I'm going up this stop sign, and I'm thinking, there's no way that I can make it home on this amount of gas. What am I going to do? So I thought, well, I will just, if you've ever studied the ideas of the Comte de Saint-Germain, that you can materialize things that you need. And I thought, well, I'll just ask Saint-Germain to help me, and I'll just materialize more gas in my gas tank. And as I'm approaching the stop sign, that wasn't working. I'm looking at the gas gauge, and it's still on dead empty. And I'm like, oh, God, now what do? I don't want to spend the whole night in my truck, and I don't want to go back and walk, back to the cornfield and walk through the cornfield another quarter of a mile to this cabin and wake up Larry and spend the night. I was thinking, well, what else can I do? So I said, Space Brothers, can you help me? And at that moment, I came up to the stop sign, and I stopped, and I'm looking down, it's up on a ridge, and I'm looking down to the left back towards where I live 25 miles away, and there in the distance, I can't believe it, I see a black disc about 20 miles away, maybe 15 miles, probably 15 miles away, with a very faint spotlight, like a regular car headlight, on the bottom center of it. And the moon was so bright, the sky was almost blue, and the clouds were all white, and there is this black shape moving towards me with a spotlight on the bottom of it. And I was like, oh my God, what's that? And I thought, wow, I think there's a saucer coming towards me. So I pulled, and it was going maybe 20 miles an hour, so this was not zipping along, and it's maybe 15 miles away. So I pulled the car off to the right. There was a pull-off area on the highway, and I had my camera with me. And at that time, it was before digital cameras. I had a Nikon with a wide-angle lens and Tri-X pan film in there. And I told you that I started making money as a photographer starting at age 11. So I'm like, I've got to get a picture of this thing when it comes overhead, because it was headed straight towards me from 15 miles away, and it just kept getting closer and closer. So I opened up the lens, I slowed down the shutter, and I'm thinking, well, if I take a picture at a 30th of a second, it might be blurry, but at least I'll get this headlight overhead. I might not get the black saucer against the black sky, but at least I'll get a picture of something. So I'm standing there, and slowly, sure enough, the saucer comes from 15 miles away, comes and passes directly over me. So I start shooting pictures, and I probably shot about 15 pictures. Now, I'm really good at holding still, and I'm also good at tracking things with the camera. So I tried both. I took where I'm motionless, and then I took a few pictures where I changed the shutter speed between a 15th, a 30th, and a 60th, and I opened up, the lens was already as wide open as I could, but, so I shot about 15 pictures, and the thing just continued. It just passed right over me, and continued on its course. It never changed. It was in a straight line from the moment I first saw it, till it got to the car, and it continued on that line until it disappeared off to the northeast, probably about 3 or 4 miles away. So, I'm like, wow. So what was that all about? So I get back in the car, turn on the key to the ignition, and bingo, I've got a quarter of a tank of gas. So I'm like, oh my God, I was refueled by a saucer. So I couldn't get over that. So I had enough gas to get home. I told Janet, I told all kinds of people, and about a week later, it was the Green Party had just started. And I didn't know if I wanted to be a member of it or have anything to do with it, but I wanted to go to the meeting to see what was up. And it was about 20 miles away in this other town. They had a preliminary meeting for the Green Party. So I went to it, and I didn't find it that interesting, to be honest with you. And then towards the end, everybody said, well, the moderators or the people in charge said, after we adjourn the meeting in a few minutes, why doesn't everybody stay and talk with each other? And so I was talking to some people, and I said, about 2 weeks ago, I had a saucer incident, and I said, I write about saucers and I investigate them, and I have had experience with extraterrestrials and saucers. And the woman said, well, did you hear about the incident 2 weeks ago? And I thought that my talking had gotten around to somebody who got to somebody who got to somebody who told these people. So I'm like, oh, about my getting refueled by a saucer. And the woman said, I don't think so. She goes, there are these two twins in Blue Hill, and they were in Deer Isle, and that was where I first saw the saucer come from that night. They were in Deer Isle, and they were headed back to Blue Hill, and all of a sudden this black saucer passed low over their car, and their car stalled, and they couldn't get it started again. And they got really scared, and they jumped, and this is that same woman, Tracy, who was in the house when the blue lights came through the window. So she had blue lights come through a window in a house where she was staying, scare the hell out of her. Now she's in a car driving north on the highway, and a black saucer, and this saucer was small, by the way, it was about 20 feet in diameter. It passed low over her car, and her car stalled, and they couldn't get it restarted. So she and her sister jumped out of the car, scared out of their minds, and luckily, right behind them was another carload of girls that they knew, and they ran over to the car, slowed, and goes, what's wrong? And they said, take us home right now. So they got in this other car and went home and left their car on the road. And so I always wondered if that saucer came low over Tracy's car and took gasoline from her car and used it to refill my car, or what exactly happened. And I never did get an answer to it, but I thought it was really interesting the way Tracy was involved with both incidents, and both of them were scary to her, and one of them I had nothing to do with, and the second one was where I had spent the whole day lecturing about how there are good extraterrestrials out there who will help you, and then I had forgotten to get gas and needed it. So what do you think of that story, Royce?
Sounds pretty wild. I mean, a lot of people would have a lot of trouble buying that if they weren't standing there themselves.
So about 3 weeks later, I used up the last bit of film on that roll, and I developed it myself. And I knew that I had pictures of the saucer that I had taken from the ground at night, and I developed it for a little bit longer. You know, that's called like pushing the f-stops, you know, to make sure that I had an image. And the only blank images on the whole roll of film were the pictures I took of that saucer.
Okay, do you still have the pictures?
No, there was no. Those frames were blank. It was like I took the pictures, I had the roll of film in there, I took the pictures, I developed it myself, taking extra care, thinking, well, the image is going to be really faint, I'm going to push it, and nothing. And even though it had a white light like a car headlight in the bottom center of it, it wasn't glowing in the air, it was just a black disc with a white light on the bottom center. Even though I was taking pictures of a headlight, a car headlight overhead, over my head, probably 50 feet, still nothing was on those frames.
Now, I was wondering, we were talking about taking these pictures of this one that brought you the gas. Some of the other pictures or not pictures, but UFOs that you mentioned, I was under the impression were during daylight hours. I could have been wrong. Did you not try to take a picture of any of the other UFOs, or were any of them during daytime, or what?
No, but what happened that was pretty interesting was in 1994 there was a mountaintop that I had my eye on that I would have liked to been able to buy some land on it if I could, and it was October, and Janet had just gotten a license plate that said Jan-ET. So we like that because the flights from Las Vegas to Area 51 are called the Janet flights.
We didn't even know that till after we got the plate.
And Janet got a new truck and a new license plate, and it said Jan-ET.
And when I went to get the plate, the guy said, "Oh, you're going to start seeing those now, those UFOs, because you're going to be seeing them."
So it was a beautiful day, October 1994. And we said, let's drive up on that mountain and see if we can call in ships. And it was during the day, and we drove up, and we held hands. We said the Lord's Prayer, and the reason why we do that is because, first of all, we believe in Jesus. We don't really care that much for religion, but we definitely believe in Jesus, and we just think that that's a way of separating out spiritual extraterrestrials from non-spiritual ones. So we say the Lord's Prayer, and then we ask for kind and unselfish extraterrestrials to contact us. Mm-hmm. So we're holding hands and asking them to come, and it's beautiful. Actually, it was in the morning. It was probably about 8 or 9 in the morning, and we had her camera. We had one of those. What do they? They shoot that 126 film. It was like a little cartridge or something. Anyway, 28 millimeter film. Yeah, color. So we were there for an hour, and it was so beautiful being up on this mountaintop, looking out at all the colored leaves, and it was quiet, and there was nothing going on, nothing in the sky. And we kept saying, well, we're here, if you can come down, and we'd love to see you, and we'd like to take a picture of you, too, if we could, in response to your question. And so nothing happened after an hour. So I said, well, let me take a picture of you standing next to your truck with this beautiful view in the background, this fall view. And so she stood there, and I took a picture, and then we stayed up there another hour, and still nothing happened. So about 3 weeks later, we finished the roll of film, and we had it developed, and lo and behold, right over her head is a heel-shaped saucer, sort of like what some of the people drew who said that's what landed at Roswell. And there it was, a metallic ship, very small. I mean, some people looked at it and said, oh, that must be an imperfection in the film, or else it's a bird. And so we brought the negative to Bangor Photo, and they had a microscope, and we used the microscope, and we all agreed that it was something metallic, motionless in the air, shaded by the sun, the same as everything else in the background. And when I took that picture, there was nothing through the viewfinder. And when I took it, I didn't know that I had taken a picture of a UFO. And when we had it developed, all of a sudden, tons of people became interested in it. MUFON wanted a copy, and it was put in a newsletter, and all kinds of people were interested. And we were never able to prove exactly what that was, except that we looked through the microscope, and it was not an imperfection in the film. It was actually a metallic object, motionless. So by that I inferred that they must have a really good sense of humor, because either they were there and we didn't see them but the film did, or they just magically materialized for the same 125th of a second that it took to take that picture. So later, 5 years later, I was able to buy the mountaintop, and that is one of our views from the top of this mountain, and that's where we live now. So that's the only picture we've ever gotten of a UFO, Royce.
And we took it to a UFO conference in New Hampshire, and some of the speakers wanted the negative, and we said, oh no.
Yeah, I've never given the negative away, but we handed out prints. And then later I scanned it, but we've never given the negative away. But that was in all these years, 22 years of seeing UFOs, that's the only picture we've ever taken where we got one, and we didn't even know we were getting one.
And it's funny because when I went to get the film developed to pick up the negatives, there was this man I knew growing up close to where I lived, and he was in the store at the time, and I showed him the UFO, and he goes, well, I have seen a few UFOs myself. So it was like, it's sort of verified, because he was actually an Episcopal minister, and he was very, very kind, and his wife was Native American. So they were a little different than most, he was quite different from most Episcopal ministers. But he had seen many UFOs all around Maine. So I thought that was sort of kind of cool that he would have been there at the time when I picked up the film.
Right.
Pictures.
That is cool, the way the timing, it just had to be synchronicity. But, you know, I was thinking that you guys had said that, if I understood you correctly, these UFOs were landing right out there in your yard. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, that's what I was trying to say, is we had this one over a tree. We didn't actually have one sitting on the ground in our yard, no. But we've had them in our yard. We had in October of 2006, we had a friend over, and we were having a bonfire at the top of the mountain on the full moon. So as the sun sets, the full moon is rising. So we lit the fire, and we're looking out at the islands and the ocean, and we're talking, and we're having cocoa, and it was pretty nice. And then all of a sudden, there was the weirdest animal sound from the woods to the west of us, from the forest. It was almost like Bigfoot was out there. And it was so strange because it was such a deep voice. You could tell that whatever made the voice was a very large animal. And it wasn't, you know, a moose or a deer or a coyote or a bird, a turkey or a raven or anything like that. And we had no idea. And the three of us heard that. And at that exact moment, this white cotton fuzzball about the size of the full moon moved straight at me from over the ocean. And I turned to Janet and our guest, Chris, and I said, look at that. And it came from about 30 miles out in the ocean towards me, sitting in my chair, for about 10 miles. And it did that just like, you know, just like in the snap of a finger, it was there. And then all of a sudden it made a turn to the right. So now it's going, I'm facing south, so now it's heading west. And as it turned west, it turned to the most beautiful giant, and I mean giant. This is by now it's closer, so it's even bigger than the full moon. And it looked like a fuzzy cotton ball that was the most beautiful LED green you've ever seen. I mean, sometimes you see these new street lights that have a green like nothing like, you know, 20 years ago. These brand new LED stoplights have the most beautiful green. And that was the color of it. And it went off to the right at a really high speed. And as it started going, and it probably went about 40 degrees to the right, and then all of a sudden it turned instantly, like somebody pushed a button, to the most beautiful blue, the most deep, deep, beautiful, bright LED blue you've ever seen. And then, whoosh, it flashed and it was gone. And so that was, you know, we were trying to call in saucers. And I have no idea if, was Bigfoot in the woods? I mean, there are many, many reports of Bigfoot being in Maine. Was Bigfoot in the woods to the east, and did it know that something extraterrestrial was coming in, and it cried out because of that? And I couldn't duplicate the sound. I'd love to be able to.
Yeah, it was almost like that sound we heard outside our windows on that island we lived on.
Except this was very loud and
yeah,
deep,
this was very loud.
Like, not like a refined, sophisticated
and
intellectual
it's not like we
sound.
have a lot of neighbors where they
we have no neighbors.
Stuff.
We have no neighbors.
You know, and that time of night, forget it. Everything's quiet here this time of night.
Yeah, all the time.
All the time, yeah. It's very quiet. End of the road. But anyway, what I was going to say about the pictures, like when I saw that one, I had a dream and then woke up and see it. that was like seeing an angel. I mean, who's going to think of a camera at that time? You know, it's like a spiritual awakening. You're feeling like you just met an angel or something heavenly. And it's like camera's the last thing you think of. Because that's like some gift you're getting from within, and the material part of it all doesn't seem to matter.
I mean, if Jesus suddenly appeared in your room in all of his radiance and bright light, standing there in your room, would your first thought be to go get a camera because you want to prove this to the skeptics? Or would you be thinking, I know what I'm seeing, I don't care whether somebody believes me or not?
Personally, I'd probably want to get a picture of it.
Yes.
I mean, okay, look at it this way. Is it any different than the people who wanted to get a picture when the UFO brought them the gas? I mean, in principle.
Right, well, I had such a long time waiting for this thing to head straight towards me for 15 minutes and I realized I had brought my camera with me and that I had film in it and it was all ready to go. So I was standing around for 15 minutes watching it get closer and closer. I smoked a cigarette, and then I'm like, oh, I got my camera, and I'll get the thing out and shoot the pictures. And, I mean, I was looking, a Nikon through the lens single reflex. I'm looking right through the lens at the thing while I'm shooting the pictures of it. So it's not like it wasn't there, or I had the camera aimed wrong, or I had the lens cover on, or none of the conventional explanations. And
a lot of times, like we've seen driving, we don't always have a camera with us. We should, but we don't. I don't like leaving my camera in the car full time because of the weather.
Yeah, I know. Really, up until the modern age of cell phones, very few people ever really had cameras with them at any given point in time. But nowadays, with so many cell phones having cameras built in, that's changing very quickly.
Right. This was a lot of it happened before I had a cell phone.
And then there was a time that I was probably about 95 or 96. I was working on the docks, buying seafood and loading trucks, and that was a sort of I was trying to introduce myself to the fishing industry and get to know all the fishermen by buying seafood off their boats. I would learn who they were and how they did what they did, and that way I would know what I wanted to do. And so for somebody who lived in another state and then moved here, that was a good way to get to know everybody and also to get to know what was good and bad and what, who was good and bad. And so people would come in off the water and I'd be buying their seafood and loading it in the trucks. And this boatload of people came in and they said, you're not going to believe what we saw out there. We're telling you, but we don't want you to tell anyone our names or who we were or anything, because they're going to think we're nuts. But we're looking up in the sky, and there was this spherical cloud, and piercing it, just as if it were a cotton ball with a sewing needle, was this huge silver needle. And it was just sitting there in the sky. And so it was like 4 or 5 of them were on this boat, and they all saw it. They all said, look at that, look at that. And they all saw it. And so they told me. And then Janet was off with that same woman, Gina, again. And she came down to the fish pier to see how I was doing. And she goes, you're not going to believe what Gina and I saw. And you saw the same thing, right? Yeah. A sphere in the sky, like a fuzzy white sphere, pierced by a silver, looked like a sewing needle.
Exactly.
I mean, it didn't even look, I didn't see it, but from their descriptions, it didn't look big enough to have windows or and it's just sitting there in the sky. So, and they were like, these people were out in the ocean, and she was on the mainland, so that was probably at least 10, maybe 20 miles apart, and all 6 of them saw exactly the same thing. It was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that is pretty interesting, and especially since they say that if any 10 people see the same event, when you go back and ask each one to describe it, you'll get 10 different descriptions. That's very highly unusual, in fact.
Yeah, so, and there's so many other things that we've seen. Like one night I was watching TV, and it was a really nice night, and it was during the winter. I don't remember, it might have been around 97 or 98, and I decided to go out in the rear porch during a commercial and go in the rear yard and pee outside and look at the sky, you know. And across the street was an old elementary school that was closed. And so I'm walking down off the steps off the porch into the backyard, and I look over at the elementary school, and I see this ring of faint, almost like twinkling stars, but faint green lights, almost like a big circle of Christmas lights where the lights were like 50 or 100 feet apart. I mean, this thing was huge, and it wasn't really close either. And I looked at it, and finally my eyes got used to the darkness. And Royce, it was a top hat, just like Abraham Lincoln would wear, floating in the sky, and around the brim, around the outside edge of the brim, were these faint little green sparkling lights. And I was like, oh my God. And then that sort of slowly drifted off to the north until I couldn't see it. And I was like, wow, there's stuff all over the place. And I've said this before, that it's as if there's so many different extraterrestrials and so many different manufacturers and so many different models, and fuel, wings, stabilizers, rudders, none of that seems to matter at all. There's no propellers, there's no noise of an engine, there's no thrust, there's no glowing area like something's burning, nothing. They're just whatever they've got going, which I think is they have little gravity generators in there. Whatever it is, they're able to come and go, and it might be like going out to an overpass over the highway and looking down at the traffic, and maybe for an hour you see 1,000 different vehicles and no two of them are the same. Of course, these days probably several of them would be the same because, Toyota will produce a dealer will have like 10 red Corollas for sale, so, but the thing is, it would be sort of like that you are on a highway overpass looking at the traffic, and for an hour you see like 1,000 vehicles and you don't see any two the same. And that's what I feel with the things that we've seen, that no two of them are alike. But now I want to get into the alien babies. Are you ready?
Not quite. I was going to say we got like 8 minutes before I was going to take the next and the final break of the show. Why don't we, since it's only 8 minutes away, go ahead and do that? I had somebody in the chat room mention they were hungry and they'd like to go raid their fridge for some yogurt and give them a chance to do what they need to do, and we can do what we need to do, and then we can finish the show after we get back.
Okay, because Janet wants to talk about having hybrid babies and being taken up in ships to visit with them and play with them, and that matches what Margaret was saying completely. And then I want to talk about Planet X. So,
okay, well, we're going to have to see what we can squeeze in the last hour, because our supper goes down at 4 and it's in the oven now.
Yummy, I'm coming over.
All righty. So, let's go ahead and call this in a break. Folks, this here audio that I'm using is 3 minutes and 39 seconds exactly. And as soon as this ends, I'll be bringing the show back. So, just remember about roughly how long you have there before the show starts again. And we'll be right back. I don't have any commercials right now, folks, but I may have some in the future to use instead, so we're not always listening to the same thing. Okay, we'll be right back. Okay, everybody, we're back, and we're going into the last remaining hour of the show. And we're going to talk about alien and pregnancies, and, because we've seen this on TV before about having mothers up on ships, and some of them, they believe that it is their baby, other ones do not. And we're going to talk about Janet's experiences with this and see what she has to say. So, Janet, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's go for it.
Let's see. Well, it started years ago after I had my first son. I've had one son, and I would have afterbirth, and I never could figure that out, because I wasn't pregnant that I knew of, but I'd have this afterbirth. That was back in the 80s. And so then, once I met Gordon, and I would have these dreams that I would be up on ships, and I would be handed these babies, and
small, right?
Small, yeah, they could. Some of them could fit right in the palm of my hands. And I remember later reading a book about a similar experience of another woman that had the same thing, and she had drawn a picture, and that was just like what I had seen up on the ships. So one night I was up there, and they introduced me to, it was a much bigger baby, and they were passing him to me. And he was a gray, but he had the blonde hair.
Your blonde hair.
My blonde hair. And they passed him to me and told me his name was Shanley. So I said, that's cute. And then later, another time I went up, I was with my daughter, who had really, she was very thin and taller. And she wasn't a baby, she was more like maybe 6 or 7. And she had long blonde hair, kind of sparse. And so she said, you want to go for a ride with me? So she got me in her spaceship, and we went through the planets, through the, the solar system. She goes, well, I'll take you to Mars. So we sort of were heading that way. And I could see the control panels and everything, and I was having a really good time with her. And just before I would have these dreams, like I would be up on a saucer, I would be dreaming of these, like, animals, like long-necked horses were all hanging over me, like doing something to me on a table. And I thought that was their way of sort of screening my memory, but they were actually taking the baby at that time. And I would go up different times and be in school with all these young, half-human, half-alien babies.
But the aliens themselves are 100% human. They just don't look exactly like us.
Right.
They're the grays, and if they walk down the street, you would go, well, you think, well, they aren't human, but they are. And that's how come their DNA is a perfect match to ours, so therefore you're able to have babies.
But the thing is, it's funny, because I was fixed years ago that I couldn't have it. And I'm like 99% sure I can't have children. But I continue to have the alien babies. And I remember being in a school where they were all like probably 4 or 5 years old, and they were very smart children. And there was another man there that I had known pretty much on Earth. I knew him. And we were up there together, and the children had become, over the years, looking more and more human as their breeding was going on. So they have made it so they're looking really human now. So they probably could walk on Earth. And I really have this sense that they are walking on Earth. And there's times I see children that look at me like, and they can't stop looking at me like they know me from somewhere. And it's usually children I've never seen before, but they have this real interested in me, like they just got to follow me around the store.
An unusual interest.
Look at me, and study me. And I often really feel that they are walking on Earth now, and some of them are mine.
No, they very well could be. I mean, even if you are, sterile according to a doctor's standards here, to an advanced race with advanced technology, that may not be the case.
Exactly.
Well, see, a lot of times when they use a needle to extract the eggs to do like an in vitro fertilization, and then they place it back in the mother's uterus, then the baby forms for about 6 weeks, and obviously they have some kind of a technique where they can take. So it's important that it be in the mother for the first 6 weeks, but then they obviously have some kind of a technique where they can take the baby out at 6 weeks and raise it the rest of the way, whether it's in a test tube, an incubator, I have no idea what they're doing. But when I met Janet, she had her tubes tied, so she couldn't have any babies. And at the time that they went in to do that, they said that one of her ovaries had terrible cysts on it and was really bad shape, and they had to remove it. Well, the thing is that we've talked to a lot of contactees and people who say that they have had children on ships, and a lot of them have ovarian cysts. And I come to believe that it's because of all the needle punctures to remove eggs that the ovary forms these cysts. And so I've told people over the years that if they have that condition, they should tell the ETs, look, you caused it, now you fix it. But when Janet went to have her tubes tied, they removed one of her ovaries. So when we met, she had her tubes tied and she only had one ovary. But she woke up one morning and she said, I had this dream that I was on this table like in a hospital, and these long-necked horses were leaning over me, and she goes, I don't know what it means. And then she missed her period, and then she started lactating, and how easy it would have been for either of us to go, why don't we go do a pregnancy test? But did we? No. I have no idea why, but we should have. But we didn't. And 6 weeks later, she said, I had the strangest dream last night that I was back on that table and the long-necked horses were leaning over me. And right after she woke up and told me that, which she usually tells me all of her dreams the next morning, right after she told me that, she went to the bathroom and passed the placenta and the afterbirth. So, and then she realized that this had been going on since the late 70s, early 80s.
And also, a few years ago, my other cyst was giving me trouble, and it was the other ovary, and it had cysts on it. So I went out into the woods, and I laid down, and I said, I do not want this ovary removed. Could you please heal me? You did it, so could you please heal me? So then I had a second appointment with the doctor, who was funny because his nurse, I had moved quite a few miles from the regular hospital I used to go to when I lived somewhere else, and just happened the same doctor I had there had come to the hospital that's close to us.
Okay.
And I said, I think the aliens are doing that, the ETs, and she goes, well, you're not saying anything that surprises me, she said, because I grew up in the Hudson Valley area, and everybody was talking about UFOs and ETs, so you're not surprising. What you say does not surprise me.
But anyway, when they looked at it a second time, it was healed.
It was healed. They were gone.
Okay, now, any of these children that you've seen that you thought might have been yours or may not have been, were any of those children black-eyed by any chance? Not like a black eye when you've been hit, but, the actual eyeballs itself or the pupils are, pupils are always black, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, the boy had the black eyes. The girl did not.
She had blue eyes?
Blue eyes. And the ones I dealt with later in daycare, whatever you want to call it, they did not have the black eyes. But the boy that I had that they told me his name, he had the black eyes.
Okay, real quick, I want to tell everybody that's listening in chat that might be looking at a messed up chat room. I received a link while they were talking about Neil Armstrong dying, and I posted a link to the news article as a courtesy. And well, you know, these Yahoo News links are very, very, very long. And when I pasted that thing and hit send, it just spread my whole chat room and made it look like half of it disappeared when it really just went wider. And I had to empty my chat table to fix it. But, you know, Mayre, she's already, you know, refreshed and she can see hers fine. If there's anybody else having trouble reading the chat, if you'll just refresh it, you'll see the prior chat is gone. However, all the chat that's in there now, you can see just fine. And Gordon, Janet, I do apologize for that. Y'all are probably interested, though, in hearing that, you know, Neil Armstrong died because wasn't he one of the ones that said he had actually saw a UFO, or is that somebody else I'm thinking of? Hello? Did I lose him? Well, I heard Gordon for a second. You're breaking up, Gordon.
Went to gold.
Maybe somebody's downloading something up there on your end again.
And it probably. Okay.
Well, you're not disconnecting altogether.
Can you hear me?
Off and on. I can hear you, but you're breaking up, so maybe if we give it a minute, you haven't disconnected all the way, but maybe give it a minute, you'll get your connection back. Everybody, I'm sorry about this, but let's try to be a little patient and see if this problem don't work itself out.
Right.
You can actually hear a background,
Code back.
Real.
Everybody in the chat room, remember Gordon's internet connection is a shared connection, and when people download things from YouTube or whatever, it can mess up his signal, so just bear with him. Yes. We haven't lost them all together. Gordon, I think you may be back. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
I can call him right back, except for the fact he's not disconnected. It's just that he's breaking up.
That sounds like you're talking underwater.
No. Yeah, somebody must be using your internet.
When I first went to the moon and there were silver and half gold. So that's where you my getting through than all that.
I wish I knew how I could, there ain't no way I know if I can boost this signal.
Hear me, Roy. get this fixed.
Okay, I managed to make out that he's trying to get it fixed, but it seems to be taking him a minute.
But they are. Yeah, so do you remember Santa Claus is...
Wow, we had 2 hours of good connection, and now we're having all this trouble. Gordon, I got an idea. This may or may not work, but I'm going to try to disconnect you and call you right back. I apologize, folks. I disconnected myself when I disconnected Gordon, but I'm back now. And I'm going to work on getting him back now that I'm back. I don't understand why it disconnected me. I did the one that was right under his picture, but who knows? Okay, Gordon, can you hear? Gordon, are you there? Gordon?
Yeah.
Is that you, Janet? Well, I tried calling him back, but that does not seem to have worked.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's something definitely going on Gordon's end with his internet connection, and we may not be able to finish this today after all.
8, 3. Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying.
Caller 207, you're on the air.
Hi, Royce?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I did is I called you.
Oh, you called me, so now I got you on Skype and on phone. I'm going to try to disconnect you again without disconnecting me, I hope.
Well,
I'm talking about your Skype.
I'll hang up on.
Okay.
Skype.
Okay, you hang up on Skype and I'll stay connected.
There we go. There. We're fine now, aren't we?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, something happened to your internet connection, and
I know. Excuse me. It's very discouraging that see, I'm on a mountaintop, and the only access I have is a tower 7 miles away on an offshore island, and they're about to upgrade the equipment, and they worked on it a little bit this last week, and then we had no internet connection Thursday afternoon, and they fixed it Friday morning. So now they say that within a couple of months they're going to get all new equipment at a different frequency and give me a different antenna, and then after that I should have double the bandwidth and twice the capacity that I have now. So hopefully that will fix it.
Okay. Well, back to where we were at. I Googled it while you were gone, and I found out that it was, well, Neil Armstrong is one of them that had, seen a UFO before, but yeah, he's evidently passed away now. But I was sharing that in the chat room, and it messed up my chat room. But we're back to normal on that. So why don't we take up where we were at? And
okay.
We got 45 minutes left to try to squeeze in what all we can squeeze in.
Okay. Well, what I wanted to say is that Janet and I had started lecturing in public starting in 1990. And so by 1991, we were doing lectures all the time together. And there were different groups like the Variety Club at the Congregational Church, and they put that in the newspaper, and about 200 people showed up. And the thing we were talking about was that pole shift is coming. It's a natural event. You can't change it, and that it's a spiritual choice. It's like if, some people, when there's bad conditions, they become bad, and sometimes when there's bad conditions, people become really good. And that's sort of what's coming up now, is that we're having the end of all governments, all religions, all economies. We're having a natural disaster, which is probably going to kill most people on Earth, not all of them, but most. And the government's known about it for 60 years, and they could have let everyone know and helped save everyone. But instead they've covered it up, and there's still no evidence that anybody except the government is preparing for a disaster. And there are a lot of strange things have been happening recently. If you follow the news, you see that the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration ordered hollow point bullets. The Social Security Administration ordered hollow point bullets. FEMA started handing out potassium iodide pills to everyone that lives within 10 miles of a nuclear plant in the New Madrid fault area. Last year, the government ordered $1 billion worth of freeze-dried food and stuck it all in the tunnels under Kokomo, Indiana. And there are rumors that the military has been told that there might be a need to evacuate to new locations. There have been rumors about FEMA work camps and all kinds of strange things that all point to some sort of a disaster. And the FEMA and the other groups like that have had a series of commercials on TV that everyone should be prepared. They should have food and water set aside. They should have medical equipment. They should have a bug-out bag. In other words, you should have fully packed backpacks. So if all you can take with you is your shirt on your back and your backpack, you're ready to go. So it's a time that we've never seen before, where there are lots of sinkholes, earthquakes, volcanoes going off, the strangest weather, and all of this can be explained by Planet X being in between the Earth and the Sun. And I want to tell everyone that if you want to start reading about this yourself and see what you need to learn, you've got to go to ZetaTalk.com. There's a woman in Wisconsin named Nancy Diane Leader who, since 1995, has taken questions from the public and asked them of the Zetas, and she's telepathic, and they give the answers, and she writes them out. And that website, ZetaTalk.com, has got 39,000 pages of questions and answers about extraterrestrials, about pole shift, about Planet X, and where the safe areas are, and what's going to be happening, and how the government's been trying to cover it up, and what evidence there is. So all of this is extremely interesting, and a lot of people spend a lot of time complaining that there couldn't be extraterrestrials, there couldn't be a woman in Wisconsin who's in touch with them, that maybe she's running a cult, or that there's something strange or evil about what she's doing. But it's not that at all, because in 1995, when that website started, Janet and I looked at it and said, well, we know that already. And so we never went back. But around 2006, we said, who's saying exactly what we're saying? And that's where we started reading Zeta Talk and realized that Nancy Lieder is exactly the same things that we're saying. And she's saying them in more detail, and she's even got maps and diagrams, and people send her pictures, and there's all kinds of evidence. So, and it's too much for me to summarize 39,000 pages in the few minutes that I have left talking to you. But the thing is, instead of grumbling about how there couldn't be extra...
Uh-oh, not again.
Hi, this is Gordon. Please leave a message. Thank you.
Well...
Please record your message. When you have finished recording, you may hang up or press 1 for more options.
Well, Gordon, I tried to call you back, and I got your answering machine.
Yeah, and I called you back. I'll call you back. But it's funny, Royce, how when we're talking about contacting extraterrestrials, nobody messes with us. But when all of a sudden we're going to discuss the government and political things, I can't get through on Skype, and then AT&T drops my call. What do you think about that?
Now, I don't know what to make out of that. I know that cell phones are notorious for getting dropped, and especially in the mountains, and you're in the mountains, so...
Well, I'm on the mountain. I'm looking at a tower 7 miles to my north, and there's a tower line of sight to me 8 miles to the south, so you think that I would have a good connection, but I guess not.
I guess not. I mean, it's not, at least not where you're at. It doesn't appear to be. But
right.
Why don't we continue on with where we were at, and let's see if we can save some time to hopefully for Janet to finish what she was saying about the alien babies, because there's been some requests for that. And well, the person that...
Well, do you have a question for Janet? I'll hand the phone to her.
No, that's okay, because the person that was asking had to go. Suddenly, her daughter's calling her. She wanted to tell us it was a great show. So let's go ahead and go with where you were at, and if need be, we can bring Janet back at a future date.
Okay, yeah, she would love to be on in a future date. And she's shamanic. She actually went to a school for shamanic things, and she was better than the teacher and better than all the students, so she dropped out because she was already ahead of them. She's part Native American, and she's gone through a lot of abuse in her life, and somehow her antenna grew beyond anything that anybody else is capable of doing. And so she's very sensitive, very intuitive, and psychic, and she has had some really spectacular dreams about pole shift. She had a dream that when the tidal wave comes in, it's pushing ice ahead of it, which I would interpret to mean that pole shift would occur in April of some year, either April next year or April the year after. She's had dreams where she was in the water and there were these islands crowded with people, and she tried to come ashore to be able to stand on dry land, and all the people on the island said, no, we're already too crowded, stay away, and we're trying to fight her off with sticks. And then she had another dream where she was with her family, and they're all fishermen, and they all live on the coast, and with a 600-foot tidal wave coming in, they're probably not going to survive. And they all got in a circle and said goodbye to each other and said that they loved each other, and they knew they weren't going to survive, and they just held hands, and then the tidal wave came in and killed everybody.
There was a big white light in the sky.
And there's a big white light in the sky when that happened. And then the other day she had a dream where there was this huge primitive Indian figure like a Kachina doll in the sky, this giant image that everyone could see. It was huge, and it looked like an Indian doing a dance, like a ghost dance, and in each hand had a stick. And then she looked down, and she was the only one that could see this, but it was like the creator's partner, the Joker, was doing a dance on the ground in front of her, creating this sign in the sky. And we were talking to Nancy Lieder, and Nancy Lieder said the ETs have promised many, many signs in the sky. So hopefully there'll be things that will cause the government to have to reveal that Planet X is here, and that will in and of itself save lives. What the Zetas say is that there's a 93% chance. Now, the reason why they say that is because it's in the hands of man, and they may not decide to do this, but there's a 93% chance that Obama would hold a press conference and say, and you'll love this, Royce, it's all Bush's fault because the Bush family covered it up, but after years of trying to get to the facts, they uncovered that there is a planet, Planet X, between the Earth and the Sun, and it is going to cause pole shift, but there'll only be a few minor quakes and a little bit of sloshing of the ocean, so everybody stay at your job, don't run for the hills, and just keep working, and there's nothing to worry about. And then he'll turn the press conference over to NASA or some other scientists who will explain how there is a planet between the Earth and the Sun, and but not to worry. Whereas I'm telling you, run for the hills. I'm saying there is going to be a 600-foot tidal wave worldwide, and like in Texas, it's going to come in and it's going to hit those lines of hills that are going to funnel it even higher, maybe as high as 800 feet. So, and that's why the government has moved all of its offices to Colorado. The IRS is there, the CIA is there, NASA has moved there. And why Colorado? Why isn't Washington, D.C. good enough for everybody? And the issue is that it's at sea level, and it's going to be wiped out. So the government knows this. So when you look at all these plans, the hollow point ammunition for Social Security administrators, the hollow point ammunition for National Oceanic and Atmospheric administrators, I mean, why are they arming all the federal agencies? Are they figuring there's going to be, I mean, on the one hand, you could say there's economic chaos is at our door now, because you look at the European common market, you look at the drought and the food crisis, you look at all these things, and you say, well, we could have civil unrest at any moment. But if you add civil unrest to natural calamities, that means there isn't going to be any rescue. I mean, you can't rescue everybody in every state from everything that's going to happen. Falls of rocks, drought causing forest fires, lack of food. Most people don't realize grocery stores only have 3 days worth of food on hand. So, people should be watching those shows, the Survivor Man show, and there's lots of them where people go out in the wilderness and they have nothing, and then they have to spend a week there eating and surviving. And those are shows that people should be watching. People should be interested in, like, what if today, instead of going to a restaurant or opening up the refrigerator, we went out into our yard and we tried to eat off the land for a day. And so there are going to be a lot of harsh decisions. And let's say you've got a bunch of unselfish people that are going to be able to work together to survive, and some selfish people in a gang come along to rape, loot, and rob, and maybe eat all your food and kill everybody, then your only choice is going to be defense. I mean, these aren't people that you're going to be negotiating with. These are people you may have to shoot. So there's going to be a lot of tough decisions. But the obvious thing is that something big is about to happen. Everyone can sense that. And everyone feels disillusioned with everything that they've worked for all their lives because the economy has pulled the rug out from under everyone. So you've got this situation where all the signs, the little snippets of news that we get are federal agencies preparing for some unbelievable disasters at every level. And then you have people making prophetic predictions. A lot of those aren't worth the paper they're printed on. But, whether it's, and I doubt anything particular is going to happen on December 21st, 2012, but nobody knows. But there are a lot of people saying, well, something's going to happen between August and September, and it should already be happening, and I don't see any particular sign of it. And then a lot of people are waiting for December 21st, but I feel that pole shift is going to happen either on an August 1st, December 1st, or April 1st of some year. And I think the earliest it could happen would be April of 2013, and the next window for it to happen would be April of 2014. But the thing is, the extraterrestrials have said they do know the exact date of pole shift, but they will not announce it unless it is to a worldwide audience. And so Nancy Lieder is prepared for the day that all the networks come knocking at her door, and when she's sure that the whole world is listening, and she will tell everyone. But short of that, the Zetas have said that when Planet X, which is below the sun right now, so you don't need to be an astronomer, you don't need to have $1 million telescope, you just need to go out and look at the rising sun or the setting sun, taking the additional filtering of the atmosphere, and you'll see this huge cloud beneath the sun if you're in the northern hemisphere, and if you're in the southern hemisphere, it would be above the sun. And when you see that, that's it. That's the tail of Planet X. Planet X is 29,000 miles in diameter, and it has a twin-stranded tail 5 million miles long of rocks and iron ore dust. And just the way you can't see the moon when it's the new moon, because the sun is lighting up the other side of it, so you can't see the new moon, but you can always see the full moon. The same way you can't see Planet X now because the sun is lighting up the other side of Planet X, not the side that's facing us. So, but it's lighting up the tail, and the tail is rocks and dust. So that's creating this huge globe beneath the sun. And if you go to that website that you mentioned at the beginning of the show, poleshift.ning.com, there are thousands of pictures of this cloud of dust below the sun. So it's generally accepted that all the astronomers who really can identify where Planet X is and know exactly what it looks like are not allowed to talk. And it's the same old problem, you know, if you go outside the accepted realm, then you lose tenure, you're never published again, you can't get a promotion, you can't get a raise. So there are a lot of reasons why people who are in the know, who do have the credentials to speak on this matter, why they are not allowed to speak. But all of this will be over if the president, and I assure you right now, President Obama knows all of this, but he's not allowed to talk any more than President Bush was allowed to talk, because whether you think it's a democratic process and we always elect a president who's free to do the right thing, no. No matter who's in office, they're owned by people in the shadows behind them, and it's the same problem. They can't speak out unless they're told to speak out. The only reason why the president would speak out now is because it's unavoidable. There is not enough food on Earth right now to feed everybody through this coming winter. You know, you have a drought in Russia, you have a drought in the United States, you've got rains and landslides in China, and you have a situation where Canada cannot possibly feed the whole world. And they also have had tremendous rains in India. And you have the Philippines, Indonesia, the coast of China, the coast of Vietnam and Thailand sinking. So there are parts of Jakarta, Indonesia that in the last year are 80 feet lower than they were a year ago. And all that's filled in with salt water. So there are a lot of places in the world where the leaders are saying they want to talk to Obama personally, and when they do talk to him personally, they say, can we move all your people to the United States? And Obama has said, no, you can't. And England knows that it's going to go beneath the waves and there'll be nothing left. And Japan knows it will go beneath the waves and there will be nothing left. And Japan has asked China, can we move all of your people to China? And China said no. And the Scandinavian countries have said to Cameron, the Prime Minister of England, no, you can't move anyone to Scandinavia. So Indonesia asked the president, would you please take all the Indonesian people in the United States? And Obama said no, but we'll leave a warship there to transport people to China if China will accept people from Indonesia, which they won't. So you have a situation right now where not one single country in the entire world has agreed to accept any immigrants from any other country. So nothing has changed with the selfishness that we've always seen all around us. And what you have is the countries are in a position where it's every man for himself, survival of the fittest. To get ahead, you're going to have to step on somebody else. So it's not a good situation at all.
Now, you're talking about the return of Planet X, and it's already in our solar system by our sun, whereas I think it was Zechariah Sitchin had a date much further off for when it was just going to be at its perigee, much less in our solar system.
He said it 200 years from now, but the thing is if you look in the Old Testament in the Bible and you study the subject of the plagues of Egypt, those are the plagues we're living through right now. There is no difference between them. And the pole shift last occurred every 3,657 years was in the year 1650 BC, and it's in the Old Testament. Joshua says, the sun rose that day and did little circles in the sky and set in a new direction. There never has been a day like this before, and there'll never be a day like this again. Of course, he wouldn't know that, but he did say that the sun rose and did little circles in the sky and set in a new direction.
Now,
so,
where did it say that at again?
In Joshua chapter 10 in the Old Testament.
Okay. I need to look that up because I didn't remember seeing that before.
Yeah, and so that was the last pole shift, 3,657 years ago. So Zechariah Sitchin was excellent in translating a lot of things, but he did not get the date right. Because what we've got going on now is Planet X is below, if you draw a line from the Earth to the Sun, Planet X is below that line, closer to the Earth. The Sun is 93 million miles from the Earth, but Planet X is 30 million miles from the Earth. So, and its tail is 5 million miles long, pointed at the Earth. So, if you were to leave the Earth and go towards Planet X, you would start hitting debris in the tail at a distance of 25 million miles, which is 10 times more, it's 100 times more than the distance of the Earth to the Moon, which is 250,000 miles. So 25 million miles is where you reach the tail. But when Planet X comes closer, as the Earth turns, the magnetic North Pole of Planet X is going to grab the Great Atlantic Rift, which is a huge bar of iron on the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. And it's going to get close enough that it's going to grab the crust, and the crust will stop turning. Nothing stops the core from turning. And the North Pole will still be up as it is now. But as Planet X comes close, it's going to grab the crust at the Great Atlantic Rift, right down the middle of the Atlantic Ocean where there's a huge upwelling of ice. It's going to grab it, not physically, but magnetically. And the crust is going to separate from the core. And then as Planet X tries to leave the solar system, it's going to go up. So it's going to come from below the Earth equator, grabbing the Great Atlantic Rift, and pull it up over the North Pole, and then continue on out into space. And the new North Pole will be the eastern tip of Brazil. So that's the change that's coming, and this is not minor. If the president says there'll be a few earthquakes, maybe a few volcanoes, and a little bit of sloshing of the ocean, don't worry. I'm telling you right now, that is a lie. And the best thing you can do is next weekend, get in your car, drive to some nice, safe place up in the mountains, drive around and see if there's a town or a village that you might like to live in. If you like the people who are there, if you think that you have skills that would contribute to that community, then you might try to rent a place there or move there, sell your house, relocate, but time is short. And there isn't a great real estate market. It isn't like you can put your house on the market tomorrow and it's going to sell the next day. I mean, maybe you have an unusual house and that will be true, but most people, we're about to have huge economic changes, and that might end up being a blessing because people are going to lose their possessions. And if you think about the spiritual choices that people have, to be empathetic, to be kind to one another, to follow the golden rule, those are the things that are really important, not money and not your possessions. I mean, over and over you see these news stories where a tornado takes out the house and they go, well, everything we own was destroyed, but we're safe, and that's what's important. And it takes a certain kind of person to see life in that way. And a person with empathy, a person who can put themselves in another person's shoes and put everything in perspective. And that's what we're going to have to do. Now, at best, if the president were to announce that this is going to happen, then he might allow migration of people to huge open spaces. I mean, Kansas, sure, it has some cities, but out in the country in Kansas and Nebraska, people have moved to the cities, and there's giant amounts of land that are just sitting there empty. He may be able to seize it. He set up all the executive orders to do that, but nobody knew why. But this is why. If he could, then he would set up these survival communities and say, well, now everybody's going to be in a safe location, and now here's some seeds, and here's some materials, and make the best of it you can, because we're all going to be in the same boat. But at least you would survive. But by telling people to stay at work when 90% of the world lives on a coastline, I mean, if you have a 600-foot tidal wave, it's easily got to take out 60% of the world's population. So this isn't a little sloshing that's nothing to worry about. This is something that you should be thinking about today. And I'm lucky in having Janet because she's in the same wavelength. She and I have seen the same things, understand the same things, and believe the same things. But a lot of your listeners don't have a spouse who's on the same wavelength that they are. So when you go to work and you say, well, I think that we're about to have a worldwide cataclysm, your coworkers are going to look at you and snicker, or your spouse is going to say maybe you should go for a mental health evaluation, or maybe your children are going to say, wow, you've gone off the deep end. But the thing is everywhere you look, you're going to find more and more people saying, and they don't all know anything about extraterrestrials, that extraterrestrials would come and warn us, or that all governments are going to collapse, or any of this other stuff. But they may just feel in their heart that something big is about to happen. And that's what I'm telling you, is it is about to happen. And this only happens every 3,657 years. And, I mean, look at the Great Pyramids. Who built them? Why were they built? Record keeping goes to hell in pole shifts. And after this happens, there's going to be a great spiritual awakening on earth. And that's the meaning in the Old Testament. Yeah, I mean, in the New Testament, in the book of Revelation, that the meek will inherit the earth. And it doesn't mean meek, wishy-washy people. It means people who have made a conscious choice to be unselfish and are willing to share what they have with other people that we all might survive. So the key word for the future is not to find out what makes us different, but to look at other people and say, what do we have in common? How can we work together to try and survive? So we may end up with nothing in terms of possessions, but we may end up with a lot of love from sharing with people who really care, and they're going to find each other. And that's why there's no room for selfish people in this picture. And selfish people are no good in these situations anyway. If you look at gangs of thieves and gangs of murderers and drug cartels, and they're always killing each other. They can't agree on anything. Each one is trying to get ahead of something else over somebody else. So they're going to be the first to die out, the first to go, because from their point of view, they refuse to work together. They have empathy, but they block it, and they think, well, it's all about me, 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 sort of like selfishness equals narcissism, and unselfishness equals compassion and love. So that's what's happening. And then after all the governments fail, the ETs have promised that they will help humanity. But they're not going to say right now how they're going to help humanity because it's our planet. They don't want us to sit on our asses and say, well, the ETs are going to take care of everything, because no, they're not going to take care of everything. And first of all, how can they? There's 7 billion people on Earth. How can they possibly rescue every single person and save them? And some people, honestly, Royce, don't deserve to be saved. And they're no good for anything, including themselves. They're the enemy of every good person, and they're even their own enemy. So ETs will do a lot of things to help people, but they don't want to say what. And I'll give you one example, and that's nuclear plants. Now, Germany has already agreed to turn off every single nuclear plant they have, and we have that same choice. Now, but FEMA has decided to distribute potassium iodide pills to everyone that lives within 10 miles of a nuclear plant in the New Madrid Fault area, which is mostly Tennessee and Missouri, and the Ohio Valley and the Mississippi Valley. Well, there's got to be 15 or 20 nuclear reactors there. Wouldn't it be better to just turn them off now, move the nuclear fuel out of there, and then we would have no electricity? Yes, that's true. But if we leave them on and then these disasters happen, the tectonic plates start moving, there's a downwarping in the Mississippi and Ohio valleys, the nuclear reactors break open, we're going to have no electricity, but we're going to have a lot of radiation. So what's the choice? Either way, it's no electricity. Or no electricity and radiation, or no electricity without radiation. And you and I know very well nobody's going to turn those nuclear plants off, and nobody's going to move the nuclear fuel, and that's why they're distributing potassium iodide. If they want to be helpful, they should be distributing motorcycles to every man, woman, and child within 10 miles of a nuclear plant so they can zoom out of there at the first sign of trouble. So it's really screwed up the way things are happening. But if you pay attention to all these little pieces of the puzzle, all of a sudden the big picture emerges, which is we're about to have a worldwide cataclysm that's unavoidable. There's no amount of chanting or praying that's going to change it. It would be like going down to the beach at low tide and chanting, trying to prevent the tide from coming back in. It's never going to happen. So you have to understand that, and, you know, people have an idea, well, the Mayans said the world will end. Well, for some people, sure, it is going to end because they're going to die in the cataclysm. But we're all eternal souls, so eventually you'll be reborn in another body, maybe another planet, maybe Earth, depending on what kind of a person you are. And so there is going to be this disaster coming, but afterwards there's going to be a really different situation, unlike all the other times before in which it happened. And what's going to be different is that there are going to be unselfish extraterrestrials on Earth who care about us.
Uh-oh. Are you still there? Well, I know we had him just a minute ago and he was on his phone unless AT&T dropped him again. Poor man's having more trouble with his equipment than... Well, he doesn't show to be disconnected, but... Well, I still show to be on, and he should be. Maybe I give him a moment, he'll call back in. Well, he disappeared. I'm sorry for all the technical difficulty, folks. The show was fixing to end anyway. While we're waiting for him, let me tell everybody real quick that you don't want to miss Tuesday night's show. I'm going to have Richard Dolan on, and we're going to discuss his and Bryce Zabel's latest book, AD, After Disclosure. And it's a very fascinating book, and it's a lot of actually speculation that's based on historical fact. And I think you guys will really enjoy the show. I know I enjoyed the book. Now, it looks like Gordon might be trying to get back in touch with me. I see something here. Well, I thought I saw something. Also, don't forget to tell your friends about the show. Don't forget to tell them that membership at the site's free and that you get to get into chat with it and the forums and, you know, all kinds of other good stuff like that. The links section, you can post your own links. I have a download section, but I haven't put anything in it yet. I suppose I could put my shows in it for anybody that wants to download them. But other than that, actually, that'd take a lot of time, but I could. You know, the free membership would get them into quite a bit of things. I don't charge to listen to my shows, at least not at this point. I'm kind of depending on ads supporting the show, which so far that hasn't really been happening, but, you know, we all do the best we can. I still haven't heard back from him, and I don't want to call him because last time I called him, he was calling me, and I got his answering machine, so I'm trying to give him a minute. Well, I still don't see him. I don't know if he's trying to call me and he's having trouble. Yeah. Says there's a trouble with the call and Skype's trying to get him back. Hello, Gordon? Hello, Gordon?
Yes, I'm on the phone and Skype.
Well, I just disconnected Skype, and I hope I didn't disconnect the show. I can check my broadcaster and see. Well, no, it still shows me to be putting out, and now I got you too. The problem is we only got 5 minutes left. Is there anything you want to say by way of wrapping up the show?
Well, I just wanted to say that a lot of people have been interested in what it's like to experience extraterrestrials, and all I can say is no two incidents are similar, and they're always unexpected, and they're always pleasant, they're fascinating, awe-inspiring, but I've never felt fear, and you can see there's no situation where you would go on board a ship. Let's say you got invited to somebody's house for dinner. Would you suddenly whip out a chainsaw and cut their dining room table in half and take half the meal and the table as evidence that you were there for dinner? I mean, you know, I keep hearing that same thing. Where's the proof? Where's the proof? You're making all this stuff up. It can't possibly be true. But I'm sure a lot of your listeners know this is absolutely true. And we're not making it up. I mean, if I were making it up, I don't think I could be half as creative as the stuff that's happened to me.
Well, I know that there's a lot of people that are going to want absolute proof, and of course you can't provide it, and a lot of them are going to say, well, you were right there. Why didn't you get a picture of some kind? You couldn't have recorded their voices. They wouldn't do it for you, or you couldn't have stolen a piece of alien technology that was laying loose, or there's a lot of things, you know, people are going to say.
Right, well, I know what they're going to say, but there's never anything laying loose. And look, if they wanted me to have some physical proof, then I would have it. But I think there's something going on where they want people who are skeptical to continue being skeptical. If that makes them happy, then go be skeptical. I guess that's the message. Because with thousands and thousands of incidents with ETs and no physical proof, doesn't that by itself prove that there are ETs? Because how could this much be going on and there is no evidence unless they have some sort of a control that goes beyond anything that anyone can imagine?
Yeah, and it's really kind of hard to say why this is happening the way it is, because, like, when Greys abduct somebody, they usually leave an implant that's found later, and evidently this hadn't been the case with you. Some of them seem to care if they leave evidence and other ones don't. So, you know, it's hard to say. And a lot of people aren't willing to say, well, let's just give them the benefit of the doubt, since it can't be proven either way. Of course, some people, hold on a minute.
Right, exactly.
They're from Missouri, the show me state. You got to show them everything. And I can really see both sides of the party, because, I mean, let's be fair about this, Gordon. Let's say you are on the level. Let's say 100 up more are on the level. How about all the people that are not on the level? I mean, you can't take everybody at face value just because it's something that's hard to prove, because some people might be telling the truth and others may not.
Right. Well, the thing is like an idea, you know, an idea, it's true or it isn't true. They're both equal, you know. You don't have proof either way. You can't prove that there aren't any extraterrestrials, the same as you can't prove that there are. I mean, you can theorize that there aren't any, or you can theorize that there are. But the thing is that's using your mind. But if you use your heart, you know in your heart what's true. And that's what I tell people to do, is stop using your mind to figure this out and start using your heart. You use it in lots of things in your life, like in your relationships. Why not use it in relationships with extraterrestrials? But, you know, people don't even understand what I'm talking about. So that's tough. But I'm telling you it's true. If you don't want to believe it, then don't believe it. You know, it doesn't bother me, but it takes a lot of effort on my part to go through all this and share this with so many listeners, and I hope that there are people who appreciate it, because, you know, this is like, for me, it's like seeing is believing, you know. I've lived through it. I know what happened. And if I could have gotten more proof, I would have. And if I had more evidence, I would have it. But I don't. So the only thing that I can do is tell you what I experienced. You can figure out whether it was, whether, you know, I'm lying or making it up, or whether I was programmed, or whatever you want. But I'm telling you, there are nice extraterrestrials out there who care about us, and they are contacting individuals.
Okay. Well, listen, me personally, the kind of show I have on the air here automatically tells anybody that I have an appreciation for it. But while I have an appreciation, I also have a healthy skepticism. I mean, after all, being in the media, with my motto being where truth equals reality, I can't just take everything at face value, but I can give most things the benefit of the doubt. You understand what I'm saying?
Right. And you know, I've done several shows with you now, and we've talked about things for hours, including the spiritual aspect of things, and extraterrestrials, and the universe, and reincarnation. I mean, there's hardly anything we haven't discussed on the whole variety of shows that I've done with you, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be on your show. And I hope that a lot of people find that it is helpful, and it helps their understanding. And we're about to have big things happen. And if they happen, there isn't going to be any more internet, any more radio, any more TV, any more news, any more government announcements. There's not going to be any government rescue. There's not going to be any assistance. And so, even if you didn't believe what I told you, just remember what I said, because it may become important soon. And that's what I'm saying.
Right, I understand. All righty. Well, we've already overridden about 2 minutes here, and my wife's sitting there trying to use the can opener, can't get it to work right. We got a kind of a fancy one that, well, it don't sit on the countertop. You put it on the top of the can and it goes around it, so you don't have to hold it. But at any rate, I'm going to need to get in there and help her. But I'm going to be back in touch with you for a future date, probably sometime in October, for you and Janet to come back.
Yeah, well, we'd love to. She had a lot of fun. She went outside now. She's not here right now, but she let me know that she was having a lot of fun and she enjoyed being on your show. So I'm sure that if you'd like to have her back, she will agree to that.
Okay, doke. Well, in that case, you guys have a good weekend, what's left of it, and I'll cut everybody loose. I won't even do my end of the show regular. I'll just tell everybody right now that I appreciate having y'all here. I couldn't have a show without my listeners anymore, and I could have one without a guest, so you are all very important to me. Y'all have a great weekend. Don't do anything I wouldn't do, and I hope to see everybody here Tuesday when I'll be interviewing Richard Dolan about his newest book, AD After Disclosure. Don't forget to visit zetatalk.com or postshift.ning.com and get more information on what Gordon's been talking about. And don't forget to tell everybody about the Paranormal Palace Radio. Let them know that membership's free, getting in the chat's free, and that there's forums and other things that they can take advantage of, while they're here. And we'll call that a wrap. Y'all have a good one. Thank you, Gordon. You have a good weekend.
You're welcome. Thank you very much, Royce. Bye.
Bye-bye.